calling to order the 241st meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission at our Western Mass headquarters, Mass Mutual Center. Today is April 26th, Thursday, 26th, starting at 5. First item on the agenda, as always, is the approval of minutes. Commissioner Stoltz.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I move the commission approve the minutes. Corrections, typographical errors, and some other non-material changes. I went through and spotted a few just in terms of reference to organizations in a typo on page 7. And move that they be approved.
Second. Any other discussion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Next up is item number 3, the administrative update, Executive Director Bedrosian.
Good morning.
Afternoon.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. Good afternoon.
There
Testing. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm going to combine items 3A and 3B. I think the big news I have, and we're all aware of it, is that there is an official opening date for the MGM property, which is August 24th. That may seem like a long time away, but indeed it is not a long time away. So as we prepare for the opening, there's a bunch of things that I, very fortunate to have great staff, are preparing for. And you all had a tour of the property today, so you got to see where the property is and its preparation. In terms of the regulatory side on the gaming establishment, Director Band and Burke Kane are in charge. They've been doing a great job, and you saw that they have agents on property. And I think I've said this before, and I hope you got a feel for it, that actually having our office there, ready, and being on property is a huge advantage. You get to see as the machines come in and be proactive on any problems. The things they will be responsible for in the short run with their gaming agents are inspections of the slot machines, inspections of the tables. The other big thing for us to be ready to not only give a gaming operations certificate, but to be ready to regulate, is that we have a sufficient number of trained gaming agents. Believe it or not, that's happening in about 3 weeks. We're starting a training session about the 3rd week of May. I call it the equivalent of Commissioner Cameron would know, but the equivalent of the police academy. We're going to have a gaming academy for the folks, our new agents, and also our new gaming enforcement unit. The combination of state police and Springfield police will come and get trained on the gaming floor and games and stuff like that. So Director Band and Burke Kane are in charge of that. The gaming enforcement unit, I'm pleased to say, I think is in the final stages of the agreement being signed, and the selection of officers for the state police and Springfield police. As I said, there will be a training session starting about the 3rd week of May. Part of it will be here, part of it will be in our offices in Boston. Hiring and licensing obviously is being more important, more real. Director Conley and Director Griffin from our side are on top of that, and they'll be working with Vice President Mary Kate Murren to make sure that we will monitor each week the numbers of people who are applying and being hired and licensed, try and make sure there are no problems and proactively spot any trends. Responsible gaming, Director Vanderlinden will work with the Mass Council. You saw our space there. We want to make sure our GameSense space is ready, and the GameSense agents are hired and trained. On our construction commitments, Ombudsman Ziemba and Construction Manager Delaney have been and continue to be responsible and all over those items, and part of which you'll see the designation of the gaming establishment today is part of that. And one of the last things is working with the city of Springfield. We come out monthly, and it'll probably be, that clip will get a little more advanced as we get closer. We have mutual interests and concerns about construction being ready, about the overall readiness of the police and gaming agents in revenue accounting that we're sharing interest in. And I think we have a very good working relationship with the host community of Springfield. Finally, I would say upcoming issues today, you will see there is a gaming establishment and gaming floor designation. The next issue I would say would come up in the next month or so will be an issue around the liquor licenses. You'll have to approve an overall gaming liquor license for the property, and the city also has companion retail liquor licenses that they will be responsible for. So overall, I'm happy to say I think we're in a good place. My directors are working hard. We have people on staff. Right now, I think, Mr. Chairman, you always ask me, do you see any trends? Do you see any problems? Do you see any roadblocks? I really don't at this point. I think we're working very well with both the property and the host city. That's not to say there won't be road bumps, but I'm happy with where we are. And I'm happy with where the property is, although, you know, boy, there's a lot done and a lot to do.
Well, it dawned on me that if I'm not mistaken, it's literally 120 days from today before it opens. That doesn't seem like a lot of time. But more power to you folks. We got the tour with all the people who are doing the work, and everybody seemed quite cool and relaxed and comfortable that they were going to make those deadlines. So it was very, very exciting.
Right. So, thank you. So with that, I don't know if you have questions. You were at the properties. Everyone all set with that update? With that, I would like to introduce Kevin Kennedy, Chief Development Officer, City of Springfield. John Ziemba and I came out probably a month ago and saw a presentation Kevin did on behalf of the city, which was an economic development presentation that obviously had a portion about the casino, but what really struck, I think, both John and I was all the other things that were happening around the city that were really impressive, and just the general overall economic development and the investment in the city sense. And he will tell you how they measure ground zero or date zero. But it was really impressive, and I thought that was a longer presentation. If he could come give the commission an abbreviated presentation, you all would be equally impressed and understand how the MGM property and development sort of fits into Springfield's overall picture. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Ed. I'm also joined by my Deputy Director of Economic Development, Brian Connors. And every time I appear before you, Commissioners, I think back to that day at Springfield Technical Community College 6 years ago where I was urging you to go faster and you were urging me to go slower. I'm not sure how that worked out.
I think we won.
Yeah, I think you did 6 years later. I guess you did. But thank you. And so Springfield's story is really about recovery and resilience since the tornado of June of 2011. And I'm reminded of my former bosses. Congressman Neal always spoke about the national principle. And that was when one area of the country had a disaster or suffered a disaster, the rest of the country came to their aid. And really that's what happened here in Springfield. The federal government was wonderful to us. Two successive governors, Governor Deval Patrick and Governor Charlie Baker, have also been wonderful to us. And frankly, without their help, we wouldn't be where we are today. And then add what you folks did with granting a license to MGM Springfield. It really put us on the road to recovery. Today, our intermodal complex at Union Station has a $95 million rehab. It's open. It has 67% leased in less than a year, which is a remarkable achievement. On June 16th, the Hartford line will be opening into Springfield. That will bring an additional 2,000 commuters a day, and that will be the first time that we've had true commuter rail up and down the Connecticut River Valley. The track on the Massachusetts side all the way up to Vermont has been rehabbed. And Governor Baker has spoke about a July announcement of additional cars and engines, which will service to the north where new depots have been built in Holyoke, Northampton, and Greenfield. That will also be a big boon to us and allow those to the north to access the entertainment options that MGM is going to be bringing to us. CRRC, China Railway Rolling Stock Corporation, is currently producing the cars that will provide some needed relief to the red and orange line in Boston, and those cars will start to be delivered to the MBTA this year. And I'm also very proud to say that Springfield is host to Eversource's largest solar installation in Massachusetts. We have over 12 megawatts of solar power here in Massachusetts. Before I go into the presentation, let me just say about the opening date of August 24th that MGM announced this morning, or yesterday actually, this morning. That is very good for Springfield. The previous September 8th date was going to be logistically pretty difficult for us because that's also Basketball Hall of Fame enshrinement weekend. It's also the weekend where we have a major jazz fest in downtown Springfield. Schools would have been opened, and it's only a week before the Big E fairground was in operation. So by moving it back to the latter part of August and before schools are open, it will help with some of the logistical challenges that we've been talking with Ed and the rest of the staff about. So we're very, very pleased about that. So with that, let me ask you now to join us as we take a brief walk through the new Springfield. Here you go. There's supposed to be a video with this.
It's coming. All right.
That's a brief video that we put to kind of promo the thing, and you saw quite a few pictures of Mayor Sarno, who, as you know, has been very supportive of your efforts and all the efforts here in Springfield. So let me take a quick walk through some of the what we call transformative projects. Union Station, I mentioned, a $94 million project. It's 67% leased. It will be the hub of a commuter rail that'll go back and forth to Hartford and beyond. You'll also be able to buy a Metro North ticket here to go on to New York City. It's a very critical component of what we're doing here in Springfield. Our Springfield museums, and specifically the Dr. Seuss Museum, which opened in June of 2017, we are home to Ted Geisel. Ted Geisel's father was a member of our Springfield Planning Board going back to 1926. It is a very, very impressive museum if you haven't been there. They are setting attendance records, all 48 lower states, 19 countries internationally, and it has been written up in many, many publications, Boston Globe, Reader's Digest, Washington Post, free admission for Springfield residents. It has made a major impact to the tune of $16 million a year to here in Springfield. Our International Basketball Hall of Fame is currently going through a $30 million renovation. The renovation project started this year. You can see from that picture that was up there what it looks like now, and then the next picture is what it's going to look like. It is a very interactive, non-museum type of a place, and I think everybody's going to really enjoy that. And again, we have two things that nobody else in the world has, which is the Seuss Museum and the International Basketball Hall of Fame. In addition, there's been a number of downtown enhancements that have come along our way. Along with Union Station and MGM, you're going to have 19,000 people a day coming through Union Station. MGM will be bringing at least 10,000 people a day, and when you do the math on that, that's over 10 million people a year coming through Springfield, which is the equivalent of the population of Springfield each week, or 3 times the number of people who attended last year's Super Bowl. So that's an awful lot of people in the tourism area. One of the things that we did working with MGM, we're going through a downtown refresh. I think you may have seen it when you came through here. The roads have been milled and a number of the downtown streets are all being redone. It's a $7 million project. We're fixing tree wells, new trash receptacles, everything that you might want to think. We did not want to have a brand new MGM complex and not have the rest of downtown looking good. In addition to that, as part of our host community agreement with MGM, we are going to have a completely new policing situation in the downtown. There'll be 2 police kiosks on the ends of Main Street, one at Taylor and Main, one at Morrison, Main. There'll also be a new kiosk on the riverfront, and we will have a new police substation almost directly behind where you're sitting. So there'll be a completely new police setting in downtown. And the good news for all of Springfield, frankly, is that no longer, if a call is made in the downtown, will we have to take police from our neighborhoods and send them to the call in the downtown, because there'll be 43 officers assigned to downtown with cruisers, equipment, and surveillance camera, thankfully all paid by our friends from MGM. This is a picture of what the police kiosks will look like. They're pretty attractive, and we've gone through a procurement procedure, so they are looking at being installed by July. This is where right behind us, where the new police station will be, 2,000 square feet, a fully functional substation that'll service all of downtown. In addition to that, we're implementing a pedestrian wayfinding system for downtown. It's paid for with a grant from the public health grant from the Springfield Department of Health and Human Services. And to give you an idea of the scale of the wayfinding system, on the left is Chloe Kim, who won a gold medal in snowboarding at the last Winter Olympics. And on the right is 2016 Basketball Hall of Fame inductee Yao Ming, who's 7'6". So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale of the wayfinding signs. There'll be, I believe, 52 of them in the downtown. So all these new pedestrians and tourists that are going to be coming through here, we're taking great care. A few pictures of where they will be and what they will look like. Something new, Valley Bike, is coming to Springfield. It's a regional bike share program with Springfield, Holyoke, Northampton, Amherst, and South Hadley. There'll be 14 stations here in Springfield. Sponsorships have been bought. There will be no cost to us here in Springfield. Each bike will have GPS technology, and they'll be in place this July. Our downtown dining district, many years ago when we first started negotiating with MGM, what we said to them is we wanted you to be the anchor in the south end, and Union Station will be the anchor in the north end, and we will fill in the middle. And part of what we're filling in the middle with is an innovation district and also a downtown dining district. So there'll be many, many opportunities for people besides the MGM resort area. The Paramount Theater is a $41 million project that we've just financed the new roof for the building. We expect that will be in construction later this year. It is right next to Union Station, so they'll be able to utilize the 377-car parking garage almost adjacent to the Paramount. 31 Elm, which you're very interested in, MGM is participating in this project with us. It's a $45 million project with 60 residential units and also 35,000 square feet of commercial space. It's a partnership between Opal and Wynn. And we recently at the SRA decided to put some new lighting on the front of the building that borders Court Square. And it's become very attractive, and at night it's looking pretty good, so we're progressing, I guess would be the way I'll say about that. One of the other parts of our host community agreement, working with MGM, we're about to embark on an implementation blueprint. And what that is a development around the casino. So that we, again, don't just have a casino, we have to make sure that the rest of downtown is developed and monitored, and we don't want to have the wrong type of development in certain areas. So we're working with our consultants from Chicago, the Chicago Consulting Group. MGM has put up $100,000, the city of Springfield has put up $100,000 to develop this, and we will be reaching out to shareholders in the very near future to go through the whole plan. But again, the idea is that we don't want to just have MGM's facility shined up and constructed. We want to have the rest of downtown taken care of. In addition, there will be 3 downtown parks that are in renovation right now. Riverfront Park is partially paid for by MGM in our host community agreement with $1 million grant. The city put an additional $1.5 million into it, and we also got an additional $500,000 grant from another source. It's currently in construction. We will also be putting a piece of World Trade Center steel that the Spirit of Springfield acquired, and we have hired Steampunk from Northampton to be our metallurgical artist in this particular process. It'll be very attractive. It's a separate fundraising project that a committee is raising $300,000 to, and will be a tribute to those that have passed away in that very tragic September 11th event. Pinchin Park, which is right behind you and immediately adjacent to the new substation, will be our connection from the downtown up to the Seuss Museum and the Quadrangle. We have a MassWorks grant for $3.5 million, and this is something that downtown Springfield has been looking forward to for many, many years. Also, Stern Square in the middle of our innovation center in our dining district is going through an almost $2 million renovation right now. It's a full renovation of Stern Square and Duryea Way, which also connects over to Union Station. Our downtown is very, very walkable, and we have to make all these connections to make the whole piece work. The project has already started. In addition, there are different pieces of the innovation cultural economy. The arts and culture are thriving and growing here and an economic engine for the Springfield. It represents $15 million of an economic impact with over 1,800 jobs. It's something that has flown below the radar screen here in Springfield, and we want to start to really emphasize it. One of that picture that you're looking at right there is the site of Gifford Lock. It's something that we hired an artist by the name of Kim Carlino to do that mural, and we think it's very attractive, and we had other meetings with the artist and others, and we expect to go through a mural week here in Springfield in the next year or so. Springfield Thunderbirds in this building here, what an amazing accomplishment by local investors that all pitched in and kept them here. We have now attracted the 2019 AHL All-Star Game, which will be here in January of 2019. They also enjoyed 9 sellouts this year, which is an amazing accomplishment, and their average attendance is up substantially. The Innovation Center is finally going back on track. It's a $6 million project. It's going to be home to Valley Venture Mentors, and it's a partnership between Mass Development and Mass Mutual. Our Transformative Development Initiative, luckily we just got approved for an extension of another year by Secretary Ash, and it's a very, very important partnership with us. Mass Development has been wonderful to us here in Springfield, and they're very, very much a big part of our future. Other housing initiatives in downtown that we never thought would happen in many ways. This year you're going to see Chestnut Park Towers, which is also right behind us, a 489 unit complex. It's going to go through a $40 million renovation, all new windows and different amenities. You can see these pictures as Brian's scrolling through them with a little bit of a before and after. Also, Indian Motorcycle will be in construction this year. It is 60 new units in addition to the existing 99 units, and it will also be renovating our historic Mason Square Fire Station. Silver Brick Square is another project. It's in our old YMCA building. It's 99 existing units and 15 new units, and again, that gives us a good head start on more market rate housing for downtown. As MGM is bringing all these jobs to downtown Springfield, they got to have a place to live. So the market is certainly moving along pretty well. The Willys Overland building has a twin in Detroit that's been developed into luxury housing, and this project is a $9 million project. The owners of this just submitted a bid for some parking lots that are around the Willys Overland building, which will add potentially an additional 90 units to it, so that'll be a total of 150 in this one area. Our total investment since that we know of, since the tornado of 2011, is just short of $4 billion, $3.76 billion. So it's been an amazing accomplishment. It's something that the citizens of Springfield just got together and said enough is enough. I don't need to remind you, we are under the control of a state finance control board back 10 years ago, and today we are more than holding our own and moving forward. So your efforts and everybody else's efforts, thank you.
Thank you, it's great. Any questions or comments? It was Ed Logue was the name you were thinking of, right?
Yes.
Kevin Kennedy is the Ed Logue of Springfield. If anybody from Boston remembers Ed Logue. That's a big compliment. It's great, it's really exciting. We're glad to be a part of it. We'll just keep our fingers crossed that everything keeps going the way it's going.
Thank you.
Very impressive. See all the other projects, not just the casino.
Yeah.
Well, again, MGM really kind of put us on the map and gave a number of investors to look at us and kind of kick the tires type things, and it's worked pretty well.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Is that it for you, Director
That is,
Grosjean?
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next is item number 4, Ombudsman Ziemba.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
Up for consideration today. Up for consideration today are two matters: the Commission's designation of the MGM Springfield gaming floor and the Commission's designation of the MGM gaming establishment. On the first matter, pursuant to our Internal Controls Regulation 205 CMR 138, MGM Springfield is required to submit a floor plan for the Commission's approval. We're joined here today by Seth Stratton, MGM Springfield Vice President and Legal Counsel, and Alex Dixon, MGM Springfield General Manager. So let me turn it over to Seth and Alex for a discussion of the gaming floor designation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and welcome back to Springfield. It was great seeing 1/3 of you on a tour today. It's a pleasure to be here. Mike sends his regrets. He's in Las Vegas working with a lot of our counterparts who's going to help us once we open our doors. Exciting day for us, an exciting day for the Commission, long time coming. But we're announced our opening on August 24th, and working closely with the entire Commission staff, we look forward to that opening day. Seth has a couple of exciting elements in lawyer world to be able to walk us through. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Seth.
Thanks, and it looks like we're fast forwarding to the slide that has our gaming area on it, which I think is the next slide, perhaps. One more? Or a couple more? We're doing gaming area first, right, John?
Gaming area first, that's right.
Yep,
There you go.
okay, there we go. So the plan in front of you, Commissioners, is we've gone back and forth through several iterations of this, working collaboratively with staff, in particular Bruce and Burke, sitting to my right, and talking about what does the actual gaming area, regulatory defined, look like now that we have our plans finalized. And so what you see in front of you is what we've proposed and comments back and forth with staff, and I believe we're on the same page on what should be the gaming area. And that is the area shaded in red on the map in front of you. And it's effectively 4 quadrants within which gaming will occur on property. And you saw those today walking through and the machines coming on board and how those were separated. And then the green areas are effectively the circulation pathways between those areas. And the fundamental difference between anything that's red and anything that's not red is that gaming can only occur in the red areas. Minors are not allowed to be within the red area. And there are other ramifications regulatorily for the definition of the gaming area, including alcohol service and the ability to comp drink. So when we think about the gaming area, we think about really three things: gaming activity, minor access, and alcohol service, and that's why it's a really important boundary. We feel comfortable that as it's laid out, operationally, we'll be able to secure that gaming area in those three areas, and that it makes sense functionally and operationally. By the way, and one further comment, that just for edification, that the red areas, the gaming area is approximately 88,000 square feet.
Questions?
So as represented here, said the minors might be able to get through the casino floor using the green corridors shaded here.
Yes, and so, one of the, Alex, made the comment about the lawyer comment, but there's really three, you mentioned gaming floor, and so there's two areas within the reg and the statute that are important: gaming establishment, capitalized term, and gaming area. When the average person thinks about the casino floor or a casino, they're thinking about really everything within that envelope. And so when you're thinking about the casino building, yes, minors would be able to flow through on the green paths that are not part of the gaming area. And that's why we're trying to segregate out those circulation paths from what is the footprint within which the gaming activities are conducted, so that folks could traverse on those marked paths, but one, we wouldn't let them linger, and two, we wouldn't allow folks to veer off the path into the red gaming area.
Right.
When you say folks, you mean underage folks?
Sorry.
Because
Yes.
anybody else can, right?
Fair point, yes, underage minors.
And we did notice in the tour, there is already some signage to that effect, but can you speak a little bit more about what operationally
Yeah, maybe
you might do to prevent that from happening?
Sure. As we, particularly now since we've announced our opening date, and as we get closer to our opening, we'll be able to communicate, whether it's through social, through press releases, through the media, about where minors are able to go and not able to go. So first is really just a big education for our customers. Physically, above your head, our directional signage will direct everyone to get to places where folks who are under 21, you would be directed along the green paths along the outside, as opposed to cutting through. So one is communication, two is overhead signage, and three, and really the most effective, are our 3,000 employees. So everyone on property is educated about two things. One is always card someone who's really under the age of 35 in an area who's not supposed to be. But then second is that we're all human arrows to point people of how they can traverse in and around the property. And then another subset of that is our security team, who is placed throughout the building, but specifically in this gaming area with the trained eye of looking for folks who are on that borderline or in fact minors. They can stay along the green paths, but they need to keep moving, and they need to make sure that they're getting from one place to another in a judicious manner.
And if I could add one point, when we were discussing this functionally, and we're thinking about our operations, the family that comes here, there are really three main attractions that a family and minors would go to. And if you're coming in, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, the green box there, that's the main entrance from the garage. And so really it's the South End Market, which is off to your left, the hotel, which is up in the right corner, and then to the far right, the movie theater and entertainment district. Naturally, people are going to follow the green paths and go away from the gaming floor for any of those activities. The only time we think where it's important to have some flexibility around circulation through it is really the activation of the Mass Mutual Center and large events, hockey games, concerts, et cetera, because that's really a natural kind of desire path to cross diagonally through the building to get to the Mass Mutual Center. So we think that circulation flexibility would be important, but it's 9 out of 10 times it's going to be natural to be on the edges of the floor.
I know there's been a move to to make this more user-friendly, and there has been throughout the country. But I think I'm not as concerned about the families as I am about the, 17, 18, 19-year-olds who will maybe see this as an opportunity. And I'd just like to hear from our team a little bit about this evolution, meaning, what's happened in other places and how successful have these transitions been?
Well, okay. Well, when we started in New Jersey, it was very strict. We actually set up a perimeter around the floor. Nobody could come on. It's eventually evolved to today. They let people traverse the floor by just keeping them moving. Borgata is probably the best example and was the first place to allow it. They have a very similar setup where people can cross the floor with non-gaming space. It's worked very successfully there. So I think it's worth giving this a try with the understanding that maybe you give the executive director the ability to stop it if it becomes problematic and they can't control it.
So you're suggesting that the request is not unreasonable,
Yes.
and with the appropriate mechanisms and personnel in place, it could be successful? in
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask who would determine whether it's problematic or not?
It would be by the number of reports that we have of juveniles on the casino floor. We get security reports, surveillance reports, all that, so we would monitor it very closely with our staff.
And then you would make a determination that it's problematic? or
Yes.
So I'm hearing that the onus would be on the MGM folks to really pay attention to this issue, knowing it's something that's important to us, and we really want to have casinos that are safe and juveniles are not. It's not a problem here.
Absolutely. We take this issue very seriously, and coming from other highly regulated jurisdictions, this is top of mind. And so this is something where immediately, as we work with Bruce and his team and the Gaming Enforcement Unit, that we self-report immediately. We save the coverage. We review that and study that, not only for the submission to the Gaming Commission, but for us to figure out how we can learn and what, if any, discipline is needed for any of our team members.
Alex, part of the floor, kind of the crisscross is a bar. How do you guys plan to make sure that, never mind they're straggling into the gaming area, but how can you design it so that the bar also is off limits, obviously, for various reasons?
No, it really, I think it's critical on peak times. So once we get past our kind of mass opening where there's a lot of people, and in many cases we have a lot more staff, once we get to that normal everyday kind of weekend business when that bar is, let's say, really humming, that's when, your 17 or your 21-ish type person, and so that's where we've got to be extra vigilant. And so as such, we would position our security team in those places where we know is a very likely target where people want to be able to get into. So as we think of that Commonwealth, which is that center bar area, it is an area of focus, but we also provide extra staffing in those areas to make sure that we're able to account for that type of issue.
And if I could add on that, the Commonwealth Bar does have separate entrances. It's slightly raised, and so there's ability to control access as a specific bar space. If you look to the back of that, you see how the green is a U rather than an O? There's another bar on the back, which is a walk-up bar. And so when we worked with staff, we said there would be no reason to be at that walk-up bar or near gaming for any minors, so let's cut that off. You shouldn't even be able to walk by that because that's easily accessible. The Commonwealth Bar has access control, and so we feel more comfortable about controlling access to that space.
When I looked at this, I kind of go back to where the commission found itself early on, that we wanted casinos to be outward facing, and we knew, I think, from day one that yours had lots of access points, lots of openness to the public. It isn't the typical Fortress casino style layout. So, I think to that degree we can rely on our team to make sure that, we'll monitor it and see, for me, monitor it and see how it goes. But, as you talk about, getting off in the garage, wanting to go to something at Mass Mutual, you're not going to want to walk all the way around the edge. So it's, somewhat of a convenience for the patron. But, this is a different type of layout, different type of architecture, different type of project that we're working with you on.
Yeah, I'm just going a little bit to our experience in Plain Ridge, where with its proximity to Rhode Island, where the minor age is 18, some people were accustomed to thinking, well, I only need to be 18 to be at a casino, which was not the case in Massachusetts. Over there was a very easy control, and even the layout there, they have security guard on access points. As I understand here, you're not envisioning a velvet type rope designated around these areas, which counterintuitively, Bruce, I understand actually is a better result, because then people are really monitoring.
Yeah. We always found in New Jersey, when we had that fortress type setup, that the underage person would wait till the guard turned his back on the floor, and then nobody would find them at that point, because there wasn't anybody really looking in that one. With a rover setup, person's supposed to be looking all the time. Likelihood of running into somebody becomes better.
Right. But it relies, importantly, it relies on what Alex and Seth were talking about, how everybody's monitoring and pointing people in the
And that's a key factor here, is everybody has to be involved in it. They are telling us that they are, so let's see.
Now, on the beverage component, obviously an adult is able to freely move around all the area, all the corridors, if you will, with their drink if they so choose. How is that going to work?
I think that's, and I probably wasn't clear in my introduction, the liquor license portion and designation of what that means for sort of flow, I might call it.
That's a
is
later
something
decision?
Yeah, something we need to
We're still gonna review.
talk a little more deeper
Still gotta
about
review
bringing in
that.
front of the commission.
Okay.
Separate issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with Commissioner Stebbins that we have asked for you to come up with a very creative, very unusual kind of a style here at some calculated risk. It's not, usually it's hard to get out because of the reasons we all know, and we've asked you to have a place that's open to the public, multiple access points, and I think it's incumbent upon us to be flexible a little bit in our regulation to try to accommodate what we've asked you to do on our behalf. I'm puzzled about one thing. You typically for alcohol, you can be pretty good if your people are trained to card. I mean, you're occasionally going to have a fake ID that gets through, but pretty often you're going to pretty much get everybody. But do you card people when they go to the slot machines and play? Is it the same kind of culture that you can go up to people who are sitting, if they look kind of middle-aged, you card them in effect?
Absolutely.
I didn't know that.
Absolutely,
Okay.
because it literally is whenever someone does, let's say, make it onto the floor and we have an issue, we go back and we run our surveillance tapes to be able to say, what was every person that they interacted with on our property before there was an intervention? So that you could go and say, if they sat down at a slot machine at a bar, we would look to say, okay, what bartender touched them? What cocktail server touched them? Who do they pass as they walk by? And that's a coaching opportunity for every person who interacted with someone who it should have kind of been a trigger to be able to say, hey, can I take a look at some form of ID? And eventually,
Even if they're not drinking, if they're just sitting and playing and they look young, it's routine. Your people are trained to ask for IDs.
Yeah, and Alex will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe both our roving security and surveillance, the threshold is 35, and if anyone looks 35 or under, you card them on the floor.
Drinking or not.
Drinking or not, if they're on the floor and they look 35 or under, you need to card them.
yeah. And then at first, there's some folks, let's say, who look under 35, and every time, if they were a frequent customer, there's been experience where you're able to give someone a wristband so that it lets the employee know that, hey, this person has been asked for their ID multiple times, and so they're good. So there's ways that operationally you can make this happen such that it's easier for the customer. But to your point, with I believe 7 different entrances throughout this resort, it's important that we have this free flow, but at the same time having a controlled environment within the casino footprint.
Yeah.
Well, I have a comfort level that it's working effectively at the Borgata. That is an MGM property. So there's some evidence here that the team takes this issue seriously.
I know there's been a lot of talk about people 18 to 21 and the concerns on there. You're talking about families cutting through, and I actually was trying to think about younger children walking through with their parents and having these machines on either side of them and the exposure to that. I realize this is porous and a free flow, but I don't know if there's any way to visually break it up in terms of younger children, so that you're walking through and you're talking about the bar is raised, it's separated, there's a differentiation. Whether there's any way to do that kind of thing that still allows for the flow, but also takes in mind that you're you're bringing younger patrons through this pathway also, who may not be even close to trying to attempt to use a slot machine or a gaming thing, but there's still an impact to walking through the floor.
No, and I think that's an important point. I think in terms of educating, let's say, our consumer, for someone who is, let's say, concerned about that fact, and if they are coming from our parking garage, let's say, to the Mass Mutual Center, there is a way to go to the casino, but there's also another way to go around the casino so that they would never have to step foot. And so I think some way of making sure that we educate the consumer about what are the different ways that you can get from, whether it's our garage or from the plaza, to where you want to go, that if you do not choose to go buy those machines, there is a way to do that. And again, that's the benefit of having the somewhat porous nature of our floor.
And I think the sign, we'd like to see the signage at some point. That's, but I think if there's good signage there, then a responsible parent isn't going to walk through. They'll follow the signs that says 21, go that way. And at some point, the parent has a responsibility here as well. But I would like to see at some point, I guess you don't have it now, I didn't see any that was up, but how do you see that? It's a lot of extra messages to carry.
So when we were on the tour, as you walked in from the valet area, there was a board up that kind of had this depiction.
Yes.
And right to the right, there was a sign, not quite as large as the one Kevin Kennedy showed of Yao Ming, but it was a good 6-foot sign with a giant 21 plus on top of it that rings this green area. So there's a constant visual reminder. And even our competitors in Connecticut have something similar. Ours is a little bit brighter and more prominent, but it's another visual aid in addition to the overhead signage, in addition to the people, and in specifically security.
Okay.
Well, I think for us as one commissioner, I think that layout makes sense. If we were to try to limit the diagonal crossing, it would only end up potentially having more fails in the system, because people intuitively, if they know that they need to cut across, they probably would, and we may find ourselves with more situations that have to be addressed one way or another. But I really look forward to how you operationalize this piece with signage and communications.
This may be an issue that we want to monitor from opening for several months and then report back, so we have a level of, okay, hopefully it's working well, but we'd like to hear, I think, one way or the other, how this is working. Is that
Yeah, we're happy to do that. We'll
Happy
be
to do that.
closely tracking any violations, any issues, and be reporting out and working closely with staff to ensure that everyone's comfortable.
Are we ready for a motion?
So I would just ask, just to be clear, I think the request is that green is fine as long as they are traversing.
Correct.
This is not anywhere to dilly down.
Yep, that's right.
Correct.
Can I just ask a procedural question in terms of the authority of the executive director potentially to terminate this if there are problems? How does that work logistically?
I think that would be up to you.
We'd have
If
to give it-
you would have to delegate to me.
In this motion or separately? In this motion.
Or we can do it either way. I mean, if we could have it come back to us if we want, or we could decide right now to give the responsibility to Ed.
I mean, I think if I got the responsibility, I would only want it temporarily until,
Yeah.
the next public meeting, so
I
I can
think that-
report to the commission or something like that.
Right, that makes sense. I think we'd want to know
Right.
Yeah,
about it, so that makes sense.
right.
So does somebody want to frame that?
Sure. I'd be happy to move that the commission approve the gaming area as depicted here in the collateral here with the traverse, accepting the traverse areas designated in green, and designate red the gaming area as the areas designated in red, and delegate to the executive director the ability to make any modifications after opening day and bring back to the commission if needed.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Next up.
Commissioners, next up for consideration is the designation of the MGM Gaming Establishment. At the Commission's March 15th meeting, MGM Springfield requested an update of the boundary of the MGM Springfield Gaming Establishment that's included in your packet. This boundary has not been updated since MGM Springfield was issued its Category 1 license in 2014. Since that time, there have been significant changes to the MGM Springfield project, including, but not limited to, the elimination of the hotel tower on State Street, the move of the hotel to Main Street, and a determination that residential units may be placed off-site. Commission staff agree that the gaming establishment boundary should be updated to reflect the current project. In your packets, we have attached a site plan that depicts a proposed new gaming establishment border for the project. This new proposed boundary resulted from conversations between Commission staff and project representatives since the March 15th meeting. Commission staff and MGM Springfield representatives recommend that the Commission approve this new proposed boundary for the gaming establishment, provided that the Commission agrees to review the boundary again within the first 2 quarters after the project opens. With the approved opening date, with the the new announcement of the opening date for August 24th, 2018, Commission staff and MGM Springfield representatives recommend that we review that new proposed boundary no later than the end of that first quarter of 2019, which would be March 31st, 2019. By that date, it's likely that the Commission will have significant new information about MGM Springfield's plans for the facility, including but not limited to its plans for 101 State Street. The memo in your packet includes a much more detailed summary of the importance of the gaming establishment jurisdiction. However, in short, it's important in many aspects of the Commission's regulation, including police jurisdiction, alcohol license provisions, live entertainment provisions, mitigation applications, and other important provisions. The attached gaming establishment boundary updates the prior gaming establishment boundary to reflect changes to the project and simplifies the current version that includes multiple levels with different boundaries. With the exception of 101 State Street, the proposed new version includes all that is above or below the indicated boundary. In regard to 101 State Street, the jointly recommended gaming establishment excludes floors 2 through 8 of 101 State Street, which no longer are planned to be used for gaming-related purposes, but we recommend that we keep the first floor, which is planned for retail space. The first floor corner is important to both the City of Springfield and the Commission. As such, we recommend that the Commission keep this floor in the gaming establishment. However, as noted, we do ask that the Commission agree to review this gaming establishment boundary when more will be known about the first floor of 101 State. Similarly, we ask the Commission to keep the small lot that is across from MGM Way and the gaming establishment subject to future review. Can we go to the other site map, the blue version?
One more.
One more back. So you see there down in the lower left corner, there's a little rectangle there. For now, we recommend that we keep that in the gaming establishment boundary. After we open, prior to that March 31st date, we'll know significantly more about the needs of the operations. That is designated for a taxi drop-off. So we'll learn a little bit more about the need for that to become part of the gaming establishment by that outside date of March 31st. So we recommend that we keep that in for now, but that's something that we would continue to consider.
John, can you repeat that? Is that the little square that stands by itself?
Yes, the little rectangle in the bottom left.
And that's taxi drop-off?
Yep.
But it's not the building that's existing, yeah.
No, it's a parking lot.
It's okay,
Right adjoining MGM Way, the new MGM Way.
okay.
I will ask MGM Springfield to just provide a little further information about one other item in the packet. It's 99 Union, which was not included in our original gaming establishment, and it's not included in the newly proposed gaming establishment boundary.
Sure. Before I get to 99 Union, if I could, John, I just want to say we work closely again with staff, and while this reflects some, we had suggested carving things out. We agree with this proposal, think it makes sense, and think it makes sense to revisit it shortly after the change of the year. This map does two things. One, effectively, it goes from what was a really fancy-looking cartoon to a set of drawings that can overlay that boundary and make it really official for the purposes of jurisdiction. And so we think while the footprint really hasn't changed, it gives that precision that I think is important for a lot of the jurisdictional questions, especially the MOU between the state police and the local police. And it also just reflects the current programming. So while the footprint really hasn't changed, it moves it forward to present day. As the 99 Union, it's not shown on this map, but if you were to based on the tour today, if you recall where the church is, and then look at the church spot on the map, which is to the far right, right in the middle. Whoops. If we can go back to the map. There we go. So where the church is, which is basically to the far right, halfway down, directly across Union Street. Union Street is the street to the right, directly across, and it's blank white space on this map, but there's a parcel of property called 99 Union Street, which MGM Springfield has owned since we got the license. It used to be a car wash, and we purchased it at the time thinking that it may be incorporated into the project at some point. It never was. It's not part of the project as defined under the host community agreement, and we're not proposing that it be part of the gaming establishment. We are, however, going to be using that for a support function for the project. The existing building is in the process of being retrofitted to be used for two purposes. One is an engineering workshop for our engineering team. So they need to make repairs, store equipment, etc. That'll be roughly 2/3 of the building. The other roughly third of the building will actually be converted to be dog kennels for 4 canines that will be part of our security force on the property, and they need to live somewhere. So rather than have them live off-site, we've explored other options, including an animal shelter nearby, but those types of dogs, it's important that they not be distracted by an environment with animals that aren't trained in the same way. So we think that having them right near the property, accessible, and to be able to carry on the training will be important. So we've decided to use that building for that purpose. We don't, however, think that it needs to be included in the game establishment pursuant to the analysis set forth in the memo on what's needed to be in the gaming establishment.
Thank you, Seth.
It's great. Those members will have a short commute then.
Yes.
Well.
Members of the team.
Live where you
Yeah,
were.
could I, this is the first I'm hearing about
Canine.
the canine as part of the security. Can I ask what they are trained to do, these dogs?
Absolutely, and, you know, at a future commission meeting, would definitely love to kind of bring our security leader, Jason Rucker, to kind of give you further details. But the highlights are, this is an important part of our, not only security prevention, but then our investigative team. And so being able to sniff not only bombs, but any type of narcotics, and any other types of issues. But really the most important, it's a significant deterrent. So if you are in a place that has this level of presence of canines, the bad guys think differently about one, hanging around a place, but two, just doing something negative. And so they're a highly visible part of our security team, and we've used this and deployed it not only in National Harbor, but all of our Las Vegas properties.
Would they primarily be outside unless there's a threat?
All throughout the
So they will
facility.
be moving throughout the facility
All throughout
with
the
their
facility.
handler?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
And the building, by the way, I was waiting for an email. The building is 2,600 square feet, so it's not a very large building. But that's the size of the space we're talking about.
Can I go back a little bit to 101? So the proposal is to exclude exclude the upper floors from 101 from the gaming establishment, but include the first floor. Can you speak a little about that inclusion again? Did you speak already?
Sure. I think the use on the first floor has been an important one to both the commission and to the city of Springfield. It's now planned for a retail space, potentially could even be a food and beverage at some point. But right now it's currently occupied by Focus Springfield. Focus Springfield has a lease that extends through November of 19 with an early termination date. September of 19 with an early termination date. Mutual option of this year, November 8, 2018. We have focused on, sorry to use that word, we have paid attention to that corner because it potentially could be a very important one from a visual. If you have folks coming over from this building over to the facility, that's sort of a premier corner for the facility. And we expressed some questions about whether or not we should remove that corner, specifically that first floor from the gaming establishment. There are provisions in the host community agreement that guide retail on Main Street and State Street. There have been some site plans approval by the city of Springfield that indicate that space is retail space. We subsequently approved our design review, which incorporated retail at that space. But given the importance in a lot of the conversations that we had with the city of Springfield, we did not yet believe that we should remove that additional that additional measure for our oversight of the use of that corner. But indeed, we expressed to MGM Springfield that we can certainly take a look at that as we go forward, because there indeed are a number of other tools at our disposal and the city's disposal to make sure that corner is developed in the way that we all want it to.
So exempting those upper floors have another effect. From a construction standpoint, they don't count towards the minimum capital investment, but also from an operation standpoint, any improvements to that building would also not count towards the minimum capital investment on an ongoing basis after opening, the 3%. Is that a fair statement?
That's likely is a fair statement. But our desire initially to carve out the entire building and those floors more has to do with functionality that right now they're leased to third parties for commercial space. There really is no functional connection to gaming, nor is there now any physical connection to the rest. When the initial plan, that was going to be tied into the building, and gaming, the gaming commission had offices on the bottom floor.
When the
And-
tower was initially envisioned and the.
Correct.
Yep.
And even after we changed the tower, we thought until more recently that the gaming commission offices would be on that first floor and connected. It's subsequently evolved that that building is completely freestanding. And so the only real connection now with that building is the programming of retail on the first floor that's always been part of our proposal. So we thought that it could be carved out. However, we're fine with the keeping the first floor in, the wait and see, and see what happens on the first floor, and then with that programming in place, make a better determination around whether it really needs to be within the gaming establishment. I think that's a logical approach.
And that's, of course, something that we can come back and revisit at any time, any given time afterwards.
That's right.
If they decide that you're managing that retail or you're selling that piece or leasing it all out.
Yep, and one final piece on that, which we originally had when the residential units were on Main Street, the initial gaming establishment excluded residential because of the police jurisdiction issue. We wouldn't want state police to have to, the gaming enforcement unit, have original exclusive jurisdiction over commercial office space or residential.
Right.
And so that's one of the, I think, good reasons for carving those floors out of the gaming establishment.
That makes sense.
It looks to me like the gaming establishment cuts the MGM way in sections. Part of the bus turnaround area is in the gaming establishment, part of it isn't.
So
Is that intentional? What's
that, the area in white is we have are in the process of dedicating that real estate to the city to become a public way.
MGM Way will become a public
MGM Way will be a public way, and the city will own the property. The area in blue will remain our property, so the bus turnaround will be a private way.
Okay.
And so the line really follows the property line.
Okay.
Interesting.
John, just quick clarification. Even after our approval today, is there still flexibility on both parties' ability to come back, change it, plans change, new properties purchased, expanded? We still have the
Yes.
flexibility to revisit?
I think that's the approach that we've been taking jointly, that we can come back and be flexible. MGM Springfield has business needs, we have regulatory needs, and we'll continue to have these conversations. Along those lines, I also wanted to mention, in terms of coming back, there's one thing that we specifically did not include in here, is that at the March 15th meeting, we referenced the fact that there is a LEED Gold standard. So for anything that needs to be constructed as part of the project, it's constructed in a LEED Gold fashion. But as there will be no major construction either on the first floor or for the remainder of the building by opening date at the March 15th meeting, Joe and I indicated that the commission would have to take action at some point regarding that in the future. We anticipate that that would be part of any Section 61 changes that, or revisions that we would have to bring back to the commission. So we jointly decided that we would just leave that out of what you're determining today, and then we're going to come back to you regarding the gold standard and its applicability when we deal with any Section 61 standard.
So what are we leaving out? The first floor of 101 from the designation or from the LEED standard?
So from the LEED standard, we will come back to you with a
Okay.
recommendation regarding how to treat the LEED Gold standard for both the first floor and to, as it relates to the rest of the building. But
Fair enough.
the construction relating to the facility would really be primarily in that first floor.
Okay.
And then the one other clarification I wanted to make, so Seth had mentioned that the residential units were not part of the gaming establishment when we first constructed the boundary, and they will not be part of the boundary as the new proposed boundary. But the commission just recently, when it approved the schedule for the residential units, it approved a schedule pursuant to our construction regulation. Our construction regulation, the definition of a project in our construction regulation is roughly the gaming establishment and other infrastructure. And so what we are recommending is that you clarify that what we intended is that we would keep that gaming establishment within the definition of project for the purposes of the construction regulation. so that therefore our schedule requirements pursuant to that regulation just remain intact. This is just sort of a belt and suspenders clarification, but we just wanted to make sure that we made that notation because neither before or now or thereafter the residential units will be included in the gaming establishment.
And under that thought process, we could allow, conceivably, the investment of MGM into the residential units as part of the capital requirements?
Well, I don't.
So,
I'm trying to get them
yeah.
further ahead, you know what I mean?
I know.
If that could make it happen.
I think what we're asking the commission to do on this today is to just roll the residential units into the definition of project as that's defined in 205 CMR 135. So they're not part of the gaming establishment per se, but for the project purposes, because we put them in the schedule.
Yeah.
We want to make it clear that they're there. If they're not in the gaming establishment, probably not under that, but that's a little ways down the road, and we have a lot to consider before we get there, so, you know, that's a whole separate topic.
Okay.
And that certainly will not impact our ability to hit the minimum capital investment of 500 million because we're
Yeah,
well in
I'm
excess.
thinking of the
You're
3%.
I appreciate that very much.
Because your first
yes.
year is going to be all new.
Right.
And anyway, but plenty of time for us to come back to that topic. That's a good distinction, project versus gaming establishment.
Anybody else? Do we have a motion?
We've prepared one there for you if you'd like to use it.
Somebody?
Mr. Chair, I move that the commission approve Blue Top Redevelopment's proposed gaming establishment boundary as presented to the commission today, and that the commission's decision awarding a license to operate a Category 1 gaming establishment in Region B dated November 7th, 2014 be amended by striking Exhibit B in its entirety and replacing it with a new Exhibit B consisting of the revised gaming establishment boundary included in the commission packet and presented at today's meeting, provided that the commission will review the gaming establishment boundary by the end of the first quarter of 2019 to determine what, if any, additional adjustments may be needed, including the status of the first floor of 101 State Street, and provided further that this approval shall not amend any commission section 61 finding in the amendment of which will require separate action by the commission to the extent necessary. That may be the longest sentence I've ever read. I further move that the commission find that for purposes of 205 CMR 135, the residential units included in the construction schedule approved by the commission at the April 12, 2018 commission meeting are included in the definition of project under 205 CMR 135.
I'll second what she said.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. On to
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you, folks. I'll just send, thank you. Thank you. Item number 5, Director Griffin. Thank you. Have to be careful. All right, you ready to go?
We're ready.
Commissioner Cameron is just getting past the water. She can hear.
Okay. Commissioners, included in your packet is MGM Springfield Procurement Diversity and Local Business Plan and a memo from me with background and context regarding the requirements. License Condition 17 of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission's agreement to award a Category 1 license to Blue Tarp Redevelopment states that MGM Springfield is required to submit this plan to identify local vendors. And specifically, the condition states, in conjunction with the Massachusetts Gaming Commission's vendor advisory team and any local grant awardee, create a plan within 90 days of the commission's request after the effective date for the commission's review and approve to assess the designated licensee's requirements and to identify potential local vendors. Mouthful. The local vendor plan was due to the commission on March 15th, and the commission staff received the MGM plan via email on that day. MGM presented the plan to our vendor advisory team on April 11th, and the group appreciated the presentation and had no negative feedback. Here to present the MGM Procurement Diversity and Local Business Plan is Ryan Geary, Operations Controller of MGM Springfield, and I'm going to let him introduce his team.
Thank you, Jill. Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here today. As Jill mentioned, my name is Ryan Geary. I'm the Operations Controller for the MGM Springfield property. I currently oversee all procurement operations as well as supply chain operations. I report directly to our CFO, but my team and I also have a dotted line to our global procurement team out in Las Vegas. With that, I'd like to let you guys meet the rest of my team, or 2/3 of my team today. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eddie Estrella. I am the Assistant Manager for Strategic Sourcing. One of my main roles is going out to the community and meeting with potential vendors and just kind of introducing them to the MGM way and seeing if we can find a way to do business with them.
Good afternoon. My name is Shalon Brown. I am currently serving as Manager of Diversity for MGM Springfield. Been with the company for a little over 3 years. Was one of the first employees hired as part of the project team. So very excited about that. I always like to tell people that I was born and raised in the city of Springfield. I'm very excited about the project. And for the last 2 years, I've been managing the construction diversity program for workforce and supplier diversity initiatives on the construction side. Excited to be joining the operational procurement team to continue that work to make sure that local and diverse businesses have access to long-term MGM operational bid opportunities.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Hold on.
Not this time.
You're just talking to that. You're talking to that one.
Got it.
Thank you. Perfect. Thanks. And with that, we also, one of our team members isn't here today. His name is Jeffrey Lyons. He's our Procurement Operations Manager. He's actually off-site doing site visits with some of our corporate sourcing managers today. My whole team here, I'm lucky to have them. They're all natives to Springfield. They know the community knows them. And I think we're just having a great year so far. Everybody kind of got on board early first quarter. So we've kind of just been building traction, getting connected with not only the community, but with what had already been established with the corporate team since 2016. So that's us, and I'm going to actually back the presentation up now. So as Jill mentioned, this is our Procurement Diversity and Local Business Plan as submitted on March 15th as required by our gaming license. And we'll cover the contents of the plan today. I'm going to go through the goals and our strategies, as well as some of the sample reporting that we'll be providing quarterly as we move forward. And then at the end, I'd like you guys to actually hear from one of our suppliers who's here today, a local WB supplier, about her experience with the MGM procurement team and our process. I think everybody's pretty familiar with this. This is our previously agreed upon goals for diversity and local spend outlined in our host community agreement. The next slide depicts the project team and how we've kind of structured ourselves, not only as a local team, but again, that connectivity with our corporate partners. And you can see we have a great deal of leadership and support around meeting these goals. Our steering committee is comprised of both local and corporate executive support. And we meet actually on a bi-weekly basis to review how we're trending. The project team is really comprised of this team here, along with the gatekeepers we are the gatekeepers of this project. But the gatekeepers from the corporate standpoint are our OS&E procurement team, Kenyatta Lewis, our Executive Director of Diversity, and all of our other project managers that work out of that office in Las Vegas. And then finally, the functional leaders are comprised of, again, some of my team, and then the remainder is some of our corporate sourcing managers who are actually, boots on the ground, issuing the RFPs, soliciting bids, going out to meet with suppliers and doing site visits. These guys are actually the ones executing and operationalizing this strategy. You guys have already met us. The next diagram depicts some of the activities that we are doing on a monthly basis for community outreach. We have monthly community partner meetings. We also are having business meetings on-site and off-site with suppliers, as I've mentioned. We're hosting and attending community outreach events. And we're partnering with local community lenders on capacity building activities. Main thing to focus on here is our local team is in the center of all that. We're the ones that are organizing that, putting the agendas together, coordinating with Commissioner Stebbins and Jill, and really partnering to make the most out of these events and driving the attendance to really be targeted to what we're looking for in that specific time frame. All of the outreach activities that we're doing are also we're going to be reporting out and have been reporting out on as part of our ongoing commitments. Next, I'd like to just talk through our advertising plan. So we already had an advertising plan ongoing. What we decided to do is enhance that. As we started meeting with the Commissioner and Jill as part of our monthly supplier task force advisory team, we've really kind of tried to dial in on what kind of mechanism do we use to operationalize the strategy, and how do we get that out into the public via advertising. And so this is an example of one of our ads, and as you can see up there, there's a call to action, but there's also some specific areas of opportunities that are laid out that tie directly back to that mechanism that we're using, or that matrix of the opportunities we're looking for. And we also translate these into the language of the minority market that we're running the ads in. And these ads are running on a weekly, daily basis in local minority newspapers, and actually on the radio as well, all the way through the end of July. So right now, what I'd like to do is give you guys a little taste of the radio ad that we actually put out. And I think, Commissioner Zuniga, you're going to translate for us, right?
I think I might.
Thank you so much.
¿Eres minoría, dueña o veterano con negocio? Como dueños queremos conocerlos. MGM Springfield está buscando un número de negocios que puedan aportar a nuestras necesidades. Registre tu negocio con nosotros en mgmspringfield.com/suppliers. mgmspringfield.com/suppliers. Ruge con nosotros, Nueva Inglaterra.
Make sure you translate that.
The tagline is "Roar with us, New England," and then the roar comes in. Right. Yeah. It's very clever.
So we've gotten a lot of great feedback from the advisory task force. That ad's actually running right now on WTCC radio, on the Obama radio.
What did it basically
Well,
say?
it's essentially calling out if minority owners and suppliers for
says-
opportunities, saying, you know, if you are a minority business, you should reach out to.
And saying who to contact.
Who to contact. There's
I
a
can,
website.
I can give a shot at my radio voice if you'd like. I have the translation. No, it's very catchy. Like I said, we've gotten a lot of great feedback on it, and that will continue to run through the end of July.
Have you seen any kind of results as a result of that, or any kind of inquiries or connections or referrals so far? I mean,
Oh,
I know
yeah.
you just started.
Yes, we've already started to get either people reach out directly, suppliers reach out directly to myself or my team, or they're connecting to us via the task force or through our certification partners.
Do you ask when they reach out how they heard about you?
Of course.
So you're tracking those results?
Yes. Yep. And you'll see an example later in the presentation of how we'll display those outreach activities, and kind of you can give us your feedback on it.
Okay.
Again, ongoing outreach activities. We're out there in these meetings. We're communicating information about ourselves, the team, the company, our initiatives, our goals, doing meet and greets. We're also educating our local and diverse suppliers on the process and how to do business with us, and what kind of resources they have available to them in the community if they do meet a challenge or find a challenge in ramping up. A lot of suppliers we find aren't ready to take on that big big volume, and they don't they don't know how to. So we do a lot of coaching in that regard, and we really try and tailor and right size the opportunity for the supplier. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I think Shalon's going to cover the Community Partners Network.
So two important points, I think, points about the Community Partners Network
Shalon,
that
can
I...
you take the mic?
I thought this was working.
Oh,
Let's take that one.
okay. No, that's right. If it was working, fine. I didn't realize you had one.
I think there's two important points about the Community Partners Network that I think is important to mention. If you remember, the Community Partners Network was created from the construction side of the house. So what we sought to do was to replicate the successes of working with the community and partnering with the community on the operational side of the house for opportunities for local and diverse vendors. So we built off the success and leveraged the success of the Community Partners Network on the construction side of the house and replicated it on this side. And then the other important point is to remember that we consolidated the entities listed below and others into one network that's convened and led by MGM Springfield in order to broaden our outreach impact and encourage partnerships and collaboration to better serve the local diverse business community. So we did this not only to help us reach our diversity goals, but to have a long-term impact on workforce and supplier diversity in the region long after our project is open and running. And we don't coordinate our outreach and our diversity and our supplier diversity work in a silo. We do that as a true partner with the community development entities that exist in the region. So a couple of the goals for the Community Partners Network right now is to increase awareness and education on the MGM Springfield procurement process and timeline, what's coming up and what's available for bid, networking and engagement opportunities for business development entities and local and diverse businesses. We want to foster those kind of activities under the CPN. Like Ryan talked about earlier, we are going to be seeking to provide assistance in capacity building and technical assistance for local and diverse businesses so that those businesses who may be struggling with an identified capacity challenge can be provided with resources within the community, such as access to capital to grow their business. And then the local business mentorship program is a component that we have launched in Las Vegas at our corporate properties and our other regional properties, where, like Ryan talked about earlier, we'll match smaller businesses with a larger corporate partner or a larger business in the area so that they can work together, mentor, the larger business can mentor the smaller business, and they can grow partnerships and collaborations again and work together on business opportunities after they finish working on our project. And so for the CPN, these are some of the invited entities that we'll be including. Of course, the Springfield Regional Chamber of Commerce, all the minority, Latino business development entities in the city, the newly launched Minority Business Alliance, the Hispanic American Institute, and then others as identified, such as those lenders who offer access to capital, and are all of our diversity certification partners as well.
Thanks, Shalon. And I think one other point to make on this slide is I got to take a moment and give kudos to our construction team and Brian Packer for all the successes he's had on that side. What we've really tried to do here is take some of those practices and replicate them in our plan, and really, leverage them and just plug them right into our operations channels. This picture actually here is from one of our commercial lenders network events in March. And so this is myself, my team, as well as our CPO and corporate executive director of diversity and sourcing team, along with Commissioner Stebbins and Jill here. So we all came together, did introductions, got to know the community lenders network, and really generate a lot of conversation around, who they thought would be a good match to our current opportunities, and also, different ways that we think we could help those businesses that needed the capacity building type efforts that we spoke about.
Brian, from that type of convening, what do you hear is the most important need? Is it working capital from a sort of finance perspective?
Sure. I think yes, it's working capital, but sometimes it's a lot of times it's really it's knowledge, right? How to scale their business up. What do you do first? So maybe you got the capital, but now how do you use it, right? How do you really leverage that to get your business ready to take on an account like MGM?
So in all honesty, I think I have the best job out there because I get to go out to the community I grew up in and really get to see how these vendors do what they do. Once they reach out to us via our website, I'd make an initial phone call and then I'd either offer them to come in, or what I would prefer is to get to go see what they do so that they can really showcase what abilities they have and what they do. As you can see here, the middle picture there is B with our executive sous chef. And I'm one of the owners of a local bakery where they took us into their warehouse. And one of the most surprising thing was that from the outside, the bakery doesn't look that big. When you go inside, you really see the nature of their business and how much they can actually do, and the fact that they can meet capacity. We went in there not really thinking that they would be able to do it. And once we got in there and we saw their operation and we found out all the different customers they service, which were big, kind of like MGM, we were really excited because we really wanted to do business with them. And also based on the fact that the product that they made was phenomenal. They had these onion bagels that were out of this world. To the right there, that's actually a local business, AC Produce, that is myself, our procurement, our sourcing manager from Las Vegas, David Talley, and our executive chef, Nate Wagman, along with Tony. So there he is, he's showing us these beautiful tomatoes that he gets in on a daily basis as we're taking a tour of his facility. And one of the cool things is that his specifically is that he is ready to expand to meet our needs. And I find that was like one of the biggest things a lot of the companies showcase was that they're ready, they want this, Once we explain the process and really get an understanding of where they are, we can really expand upon how the relationship can work and how the partnership can work. The picture on the left there was during it was the Across the River Committee meeting, and that was Bumpy's Natural Food, and she was just explaining to me that what she really does is she's trying to bring natural food selections to urban areas. So instead of like having to go to Stop and Shop or Big Y and getting this heavily processed food, you can actually go around the corner and get all natural food if you'd like at a reasonable price. It was a very good conversation, and a lot of that really just entails gathering information and then bringing it over back to the home base to see if there's a way that we can fit some of these vendors in.
Thanks, Eddie. So I think I don't know if you know this, but we kind of call Eddie Mr. Springfield in the office, and it's great because whenever I'm walking down Main Street or wherever we are with my team, whether it's him or Shalon, I feel like everybody knows these guys, and it's just a great feeling. And I think it speaks to the level of engagement and everything that we have going on with our procurement team. We really are quickly becoming and have become that connective tissue between our broader strategy and our corporate entity and this project. So it's great.
Eddie, do you have enough, are you able to say yes enough? I would think there'd be an awful lot of people that would get stars in their eyes and think, oh my God, I'm finally going to get rich, but there'd be no real fit. You'd be saying no much more frequently, and that would be kind of depressing.
Yeah, during the conversations, I'm realistic with them. I don't make any promises like you're definitely going to do business with you. I kind of explain the process that after we meet, I'm going to go to the head of the specific operation, like specifically food and beverage, and I'd bring the information that they have. And technically, usually I'll set up another like meeting with that person, like the vendor, and then like the head of food and beverage or the head of hotels. And then from there, we can expand the conversation so that they can get a good feel of where they want to go with the business and see maybe, okay, I can't give you everything that a hotel has to offer, but I can give you a piece of that so that you can make some money. So we try to keep it very realistic and not overpromise things that we can't commit to.
I think that's actually a good segue into our next slide. So this is our vendor advisory task force meeting that we partner with the MGC and also with our local certification partners that you see across the bottom there. And when we're talking about the matrix that we're utilizing to identify opportunities and match suppliers, there's a lot of times. So a large company like MGM in another industry might look at what we call their tail spend, and they might try and manage that in a way that consolidates it into a larger agreement, a larger account, to leverage that spend and save money. With MGM, we don't really look at the tail spend as much. There's obviously some relationships and some things that really aren't opportunities. Maybe we have a relationship directly with a manufacturer that probably comes into play most in the gaming realm. But then there's other national distribution relationships where we have the ability to match a local diverse supplier with those national distributors. And many times we're paying a markup to do that, but we want to support the local community and diverse supplier community. And so not only do we do that, but we also will break up those opportunities so that we get the most impact economically in that market. So when Eddie's talking about these conversations that he's having, we may identify a subset of a larger opportunity for that specific vendor in a lot of these cases. This is just a timeline that we submitted as part of the plan. Again, a lot of work was done up front, beginning in, I believe, 2016, with our corporate procurement team coming out, I think, on a quarterly basis. And then what we did right before the end of last year was do a deep dive and really start to think about, knowing the success that construction's having and what we wanted to accomplish this year and post-opening with our plan. We really started developing this and getting best practices from Brian Packer and team. We were able to get Shalon on our team, which is a great asset to have, and then from there just enhance what we'd already been doing with the marketing campaign, advertising, and these activities that we've been discussing with our task force. All right, these last couple of slides are some sample reporting that we submitted. So we have the advantage of having some pretty strong analytics, both at the corporate level and the local level. And I'd like to just walk you guys through some of the metrics and reports that we plan on providing for ongoing reporting. So for outreach events, this is an example of some of the events we did in March, a flyer that we put out, and it really just depicts all the different things we did. This time frame, we actually is one of those instances where our corporate team was with us. So a lot of the pictures that you just saw were from these events in March. And then drilling down to the specific local and diverse suppliers that we've done outreach with. This is really, again, another example of how we're leveraging what construction's already providing. It's the same format, and we thought if it ain't broke, don't fix it. On that front. This is kind of one of my favorite slides. This is the analytics I was talking about. This is sample data, but this is kind of an example of how we can report out on nationwide actuals as some of the spend begins to actualize. And it gives us a heat map of the whole country, and you can see where our spend is being spent.
Mass is red hot.
This doesn't include gaming equipment, does it?
No, this would just include biddable spend, so gaming supplies and equipment would be excluded.
So Ryan, on this point, and we talked about this as it relates to Plain Ridge, you may have a national contract and the check gets cut and goes someplace else, but the work is being done locally. Are you going to be able to kind of segment out that information?
Yes, so we will only count spend locally if it's billed and into a local business. That remit address has to be within the counties that we've agreed upon. Again, this is a sample of how we can report, or how we will report on our diversity actuals versus the goals. Aside from the chart at the top, this is exactly how the construction team is reporting. We'll also provide the footnotes that you guys are all accustomed to seeing to explain what's included versus excluded and things of that nature. And then finally, our local supplier payments. Same concept here with the addition of the graphic.
Ryan, is it also safe to say that your goals are floors, not ceilings? You're hoping to not only hit them, but blow through them as much as you can?
Correct. Yeah, just because we're meeting a goal doesn't mean we stop doing these activities. We want to exceed the goals. That's what we aim to do.
Okay.
All right, with that, I'd like to invite Tiffany Cutting from C&D Electronics up to tell you a little bit about her experience with MGM and our procurement process.
Okay, go ahead, switch seats. Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, Commissioners. How are you? Thank you for having me today. I'm Tiffany Cutting. I'm from C&D Electronics. We are located about 7 miles down the road in Holyoke. And like Eddie was saying earlier, Western Mass has been waiting for something. We've been waiting for MGM for a very long time. And I have to say that we've had the opportunity on both the construction side and now onto the operations side. I will go back to just tell you a little bit about who we are. We are a 30, I'm not sure, is it some feedback? I'm not sure if they're too close together.
You can separate them a
There
little
we
bit.
go. Can you hear me all right? Okay. All right. So we are in our second generation family-owned business, traditionally a distribution company servicing the aerospace and defense industry with electronic components, electrical products, lighting, cable, wire, cameras, surveillance, things of that nature. So we've been shipping worldwide, nationally, and working with a lot of big companies over, the past 30 years. But a lot of the companies that we're working with haven't been local. And so as much as we've had a successful business here in Western Massachusetts, not a lot of people in Western Massachusetts knew who we were. And we were kind of waiting for that opportunity where we could get involved locally with our communities. How can we develop and grow on a local level? And MGM came into Springfield, and I tell you, we couldn't get our finger printed soon enough to get our non-vendor gaming license and to approach these guys. And luckily, I had the opportunity to meet Shalon in the very, very beginning. And as a small business, we were able to team up with a large electrical contractor on the construction side, providing products into the garage and all the different things that were going on the construction side. And as that started to come to a close, we had the opportunity to work with Kenyatta Lewis out of Las Vegas, who is their, she's the executive director of the diversity. And she said, you know what? She said, I want you to talk to Grainger Products, because we're looking for another relationship, with a small business. So we talked to Grainger Products, and we had to go through a process of competition with other small businesses, fully vetted. And we proved ourselves to Grainger, and we were able to bring a partnership into MGM on the operational side. So here we were working on with the electrical contractors on the construction side, and now moving into the operational side with MGM. And they have been wonderful to work with. They're committed to their spending goals and pushing through them. Monthly reporting, I can tell you, since we did work on the construction side, you got to get your reports in. So they have been super committed, and there's been a ton of outreach. Just being here in the community and working in the community every day, you hear it, you see it, you learn about it, and C&D Electronics couldn't be happier to be a part of this development, and now working on the operational side. We're thrilled to have them here in Springfield.
So what kind of work are you doing in the operational side with Grainger? I think I missed
So
that.
what we're going to be doing is we're gonna actually be buying the products from Grainger and supporting MGM. So what it is Grainger offers a program for small minority if you're a veteran woman, small business, and it's called a Distributor Alliance program. So we, on our own relationship with Grainger, became a part of that. So we are now a Distributor Alliance member, and this allowed us to be a partner and come into MGM and to help MGM meet their goals and also help Grainger meet their goals. And to Shalon's point, and I think, Ryan had mentioned it too, that it doesn't just stop there. The Grainger relationship that was, instrumental and created with Shalon and with Kenyatta, we're now able to go to other customers with this program. So, kudos to them for saying, here, maybe this will work for you, and it's not just gonna work for MGM, but it's gonna help you work with other customers. So we've been able to now go out to other customers and offer a similar program. So it's been
And you've
wonderful.
been successful.
Yeah, it's been
That's
great.
great.
What is your role at C&D?
I am the VP of Business Development.
Perfect.
Yes. Yes, and my dad's watching from home. He just had knee surgery, so I know he's watching.
She did well, Dad.
So
Great.
if
That's
I
a
can
great
answer
story.
any
Great story.
questions.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Yeah, sure.
That's a great story.
No, it's a good story, yeah.
All right, with that, that wraps up our presentation for today. I'd like to just open it up. If you guys have any questions for us.
I would like to say, Ryan, to your team, I can attest to the good work that you guys have been doing. We've watched you in action, and also the team from Vegas come in, talk to potential local suppliers. Certainly appreciate your willingness, I think, to overcome that fear factor, to try to break up bids so small companies don't feel a little bit overwhelmed. Couple of suggestions. First of all, I would suggest that is you've been working with our vendor advisory team maybe to help you identify potential vendors, think about working with that group as we mature here and move ahead to opening and beyond, that same team, which are also stakeholders when it comes to lending and capacity building, that maybe they move from identification to supporting your vendor network to make sure, in the case of AC Produce and some of the others, they have the ability to expand access programs, through groups like Common Capital and some of the others. So maybe look at the vendor advisory team in a little bit different role. There's a great business guide that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts offers that lays out all of the programs. We can get you hundreds of copies of that. It's a great kind of leave behind for everybody you're doing business with, to give them, again, the tools to kind of grow and meet your needs. The last thing I would say is, there's two economic impacts that are coming out of the opening of MGM. There's the employment side. And the employment side kind of only goes so far geographically, because at some point you don't want to make the drive to a job in Springfield. But I think where you guys have certainly demonstrated where the impact can be felt is in purchasing. Your team has been down on the docks in Gloucester and New Bedford looking to buy fish. I mean, that's spreading your dollars really Commonwealth-wise, and I think that's where the impact is being, can be felt broader than just within the 4 Western Mass counties or within the greater Springfield area. So, kudos to your team. They've been out, like I said, they've been on the docks of New Bedford. You've been up to Gloucester looking at lovely monkfish. So, it's kudos to you and the team from Vegas to want to make this extra effort to spend as much as you can locally with good local suppliers, and we're excited to see it and great to have an example. I was kind of hoping for the Biscotti company you were talking about.
Oh,
yeah.
I
didn't put in that request.
On the election.
Next time. Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate your support, too.
I just had a comment, 2 things I heard that I thought were really important. One is that you have bi-weekly trending meetings. That means nobody forgets about this. Nobody takes their foot off the gas for a while because something else is important. This is really important. And the other thing I thought was impressive is the support from the top, your steering committee. The top folks in this organization are supporting your efforts.
That is correct.
That always makes for better results. So impressive.
Yeah, we thank you. We live and breathe this every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's apparent. I love your enthusiasm as well.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a vote? We need to approve the plan?
Oh, we do?
Yes,
Okay,
Commissioners,
sorry.
a vote is required or suggested. Staff believes that this plan satisfies License Condition 17 and therefore recommend that the Commission vote to approve the plan.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move the commission approve the MGM Springfield Procurement Diversity and Local Business Plan as provided in the packet.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Jill, we'll take a quick break before we
Okay,
get
great.
your next agenda. Okay, we are reconvening our 241st public meeting, and we're back to Director Griffin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Crosby, Commissioners. We have some special guests here today to help us announce our grants for expanding economic access in the Commonwealth's casino industry. I have with me Sheriff Nick Kochi of the Hampden County Sheriff and his team. And I also have Sheila Cuddy with the Quabog Valley Community Development Corporation. I'm going to give a few introductory remarks. I'm going to have my colleague Crystal Howard talk about the context of the grants, and then I'll turn it directly over to the sheriff. So today we're here to announce our grants. As you remember, the Mass Gaming's Workforce Supplier and Diversity Development Department has, as part of our budget, offered a modest grant program intended to ensure that grassroots, diverse, and community and business groups are part of the outreach effort. In March, We sought proposals to aid in the,
It's all right, no, come on. I'm sorry, I didn't realize there were gonna be 6 people up here.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
That's okay. We sought proposals in March to aid in the advancement of economic development with the goal of maximizing equity and inclusion for licensee employees and vendors. So the RFP sought to inspire collaborations, coalitions, partnerships, grassroots organizations, and nonprofits to aid in providing programs, outreach, and resources to achieve at least one of the following goals. We aim to ensure an adequate pool of available, qualified, diverse, and prepared applicants for the gaming and hospitality casino careers and business opportunities. We aim to promote awareness of the job opportunities and assist with interview skill preparation in the host and surrounding communities of one of the casino properties. And we also sought to remove roadblocks for unemployed and underemployed or with candidates with employment challenges. So we have invited two of the two Western Mass grantees to highlight their programs for us. But before, I wanted to turn the mic over to Crystal Howard to briefly review the grant selection process.
Thanks, Jill. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Good
Okay,
afternoon.
great. So we released our Expanding Economic Access Grant. The RFP went out on combis on March 6th with submissions due on the 26th. The RFP resulted in 17 different proposals. The request for funding came in at $7,800 to $20,000 each. Our division, the development team here, organized a committee for review of the proposals, which included Chief Financial and Accounting Officer Derek Lennon, Human Resources Manager Trupti Banda, and Commissioner Stebbins, as well as Director Griffin and myself. The proposals were reviewed, deliberated, and scored over 4 different sessions, with 6 of the 17 proposals scoring a 90 or higher out of 100 on our rubric. These organizations included the Hampton County Sheriff Department and Quebec Valley Community Development Corporation, both of which are here today. Sorry, actually we have these up here. The Asian American Civic Association, Best Hospitality Training, Chelsea Collaborative in partnership with La Comunidad, and the Hispanic American Institute. The committee determined that each of the 6 could be funded, appropriating grant amounts by taking into consideration the initiatives proposed, the outcomes projected, the budgets provided, and the amount of funding available for our RFP cycle, resulting in awards totaling $74,697.99.
Okay.
From our grantees.
So we're going to turn it over to the sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you. My name again is Sheriff Nick Cochi. I'm the Sheriff of Hamden County. I'm here to extend my deepest gratitude and thank you to the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, to Ombudsman John Ziemba and all of your staff for the work you've done in helping the Hamden County Sheriff's Office on the applications and understanding our unique needs of a department. When MGM came, we had a treatment facility on Howard Street. And to be quite frank, it was a time in our, not only our state, but in our nation's time where the opioid crisis is running rampant. We didn't know if that building was going to be able to, 1, be relocated, and 2, if we were going to be able to afford it. And I'm here to look each of you in the eye to say thank you, because what you've allowed us to continue to do is going to impact the community around this casino, but more importantly, around Hamden County. And I'm very, very grateful. Your initial and continued support through your approval of mitigation funds allowed us to move this facility. And we moved it. It's state-of-the-art. It's 149 beds, and I promise you this, and I proudly report out to you that we are affecting lives in a very positive way there each and every day. We were awarded the grant for Expanding Economic Access, which will allow us to bring Springfield Technical Community College and Holyoke Community College instructors through a smart board into our main facility institution to deal and teach and instruct our offender population. These instructors will be teaching the hotel hospitality program created by the American Hotel and Lodging Institute, and it will be a nationally certified program for our male and female inmate populations. We hope to have upwards of 60 offenders complete this program through this coming June 21st. It is my hope that the Commission will see the value of this program and continue with its future support. And lastly, and probably most impactfully for our facility and our office, your insight and foresight to reevaluate the Corey exemption is monumental. And I look up and I see Commissioner Stebbins, and I just know through conversations, through some community events, that when we were talking about it, it wasn't falling on deaf ears. And I know it came back to the entire commission. And when you look at taking that step and walking with us and taking a look at how could we look at specific jobs and give people opportunities, you did it in taking a risk, a very calculated risk, because we're going to walk with you side by side. And we have a history, a very good history, of making good classification referrals, but most importantly, taking people from their darkest times, which is the day they walk into incarceration, they walk through that intake door, and working and programming and educating and getting them ready for their step back into the community. And you're allowing us to do that. The positions you've ultimately created were 824 possible positions for the men and women who have made the decision to change their lives and to be more productive members of our community. And when you've offered that opportunity for them, you've given them hope. And you've allowed our staff to have the ability to dig into a bag of tricks, a bag of tools, a bag of opportunity to say, if you listen, if you try to do the right thing, if you try to put your life back on track and put one foot in front of the other, do things law-abidingly, not illegally. You don't have to look over your shoulder. We can give you an opportunity to provide for your family. And I'd like, just again in closing, would like to thank each and every one of you for your vision, your willingness to walk with us and take chances with us, which is what we do in the Sheriff's Office every day. And I'd like to thank everybody for the process and allowing us the opportunity to be part in a partnership with you in moving forward in this great endeavor that's coming to the city of Springfield and Hamden County in general. Thank you very much. This is our Director of Educational Services, Mr. Dr. Dan O'Malley, and I will now turn it over to him.
Thank you, Sheriff. Just very quickly, I'll reiterate what the Sheriff did, what this grant will allow us to do. It will allow us to provide training to over 60 male and female inmates, to provide training in guest services and hospitality. We'll be using a program from the American Hotel and Lodging Institute, and at the completion of the training, everyone will take an exam, and if they pass the exam, they'll become certified by a national organization in guest services and hospitality, and we'll be using the Smart Board to enhance the training and to enhance the instructions, and our expectation is that we'll have at least 50 of the 60 people pass the exam and become certified in guest services and hospitality, which MGM has said at some of the meetings that I have gone to, one of the most important factors they look for in people and their employees is good guest services and good hospitality. And that's what we hope to accomplish with this grant. So I'd like to extend my thanks to the Commission for the support in funding this grant. And I think we'll be able to fulfill all of the conditions of the grant. Thank you.
Great.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and MGM staff. I'd just like to say that it's been a real pleasure working with, we were here.
Excuse me, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, who am I? I'm Rich Devine. I work with the Hamden County Sheriff's Department. I'm the Director of Employment. I assist people with getting jobs and getting people job ready and vocational training and things like that. I know that the work that you've done with MGM and on the Corey exemptions was arduous, and it took a while, and we certainly do appreciate that. This is giving a lot of hope to a lot of people. It's offering seeds of hope to people that, pretty much like what the sheriff was saying, but these positions are living wage jobs with benefits, and we know that it affects the recidivism and and public safety very positively. The national level of returns after 3 years for people coming out of jail is 67% will return. Partnerships that we've had with the Hampden County Sheriff's Department and all the different entities that we work with, last year our recidivism rate was 35%. And that's where I think it's going to be very important with the partnership that we have with MGM, because this is going to give those people an opportunity. And an example of that is we have a great relationship with Holyoke Community College, Jeff Hayden and his staff, with the culinary program. We just had our first cohort graduate from the new MGM facility on Ray Street in Holyoke. We had 13 students graduate. Of those 13, that was a month ago, 6 have returned to the community. 4 of the 6 are employed in culinary, and 2 have made the decision to go to college. The other 7 are still incarcerated, but we're anxious to they're very close to release, and we'll work in tandem with them to get positions also. So with the announcement yesterday about the Corey disqualifiers and everything, I think we're going to have a great partnership with MGM, because we're going to train our folks for the needs of the casino. So this is very exciting. So, and it's offering people a second chance, which is all of us could have needed a second chance one time or another. And then in closing, I think we have a shared ground with MGM. The sheriff mentioned our Howard Street facility. Well, I just learned that on the corner of Main and Bliss Street during the 1700s was where the jail was after the Indians burned the first one. So so we've got a lot of similarities there with MGM, and we're excited about this partnership. And again, thank you to all of you.
Did I understand you to say that some of the students that took the program at the culinary school are incarcerated?
7 are still in.
And they're released to take
People that would be at our pre-release and on electronic monitoring.
So they're very close to release, so it's a step-down process. We put them in a van, we bring them over to the program. They're very, very successful, and they're a very low risk to the community because of the time left on their sentence. So when you start to provide them with these opportunities, you see a behavior modification in the positive, because there's a lot at the end of the road, the carrot and the stick. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So just a comment, you came here to thank us, I think I should be thanking you. I have interacted with many sheriffs over the years, and I don't know that I've met a group from a sheriff's department this enthusiastic about the back end of criminal justice, meaning really paying attention to recidivism and rehabilitation. So I really think your office is, it's apparent by listening to you how enthusiastic you are about this and how hopeful you are for the folks that you interact with. So it's refreshing, and I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, can I just make a comment? You mentioned the 800 or so positions that will be available, and I hope that many of the population you serve could take advantage of that opportunity. I, for one, wanted to get that number a little higher, but that will be under discussion as we go along and get the opening of this facility. And there's enough of turnover in the gaming industry that these opportunities will continue to exist even past the opening date. So I really also want to congratulate you on your efforts as they continue, and even we go beyond opening date. I hope that those opportunities will continue to be there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So I'd like to now introduce Sheila Cuddy, Executive Director of the Quebec Valley CDC.
Hi, thank you, Jill, and thank you so much, Commissioners, and thank you for coming to Springfield to have a meeting. We always appreciate that in Western Mass. So we are very excited at Quabog Valley CDC for this opportunity to provide additional training, workforce training to folks in our region who are seeking employment, and also to increase vendor participation from the small businesses in our region who are looking to participate in some of the activities of MGM. We have a variety of businesses in the Quabog region. We cover 15 towns, starting at Belchertown, going out to Spencer, so we're the next easternmost tier of the Pioneer Valley. We have farms, we have service industries, we have businesses who do framing and artwork, and we have worked with several of them already to acquaint them with opportunities, but we're looking to further that work. Also, the training that we're going to be offering, we're offering 2 types of training to individuals, primarily low to moderate income individuals from our region. One is ServSafe training, which is the first step to a job in the culinary industry and the hospitality industry, and we will train people to get that ServSafe certificate. Because of the generosity of the Mass Gaming Commission, there will be books and tests and training provided for free to these individuals to remove a barrier to access a living wage job. We have, frankly, already, without even making a formal announcement, a waiting list for the first class. So we're quite enthusiastic about this option for folks in our region. The other piece we're doing, and we assumed that this would be a need for MGM, as it certainly is something we're hearing from employers in our region, is that training for job readiness skills, what we call soft skills. So we're doing another 9-hour training on soft skills, I think similar to the Sheriff's Department. These are the things like, unless your employer allows it, that cell phone needs to be put away. When you come to work and you go to break, you need to return. And my personal favorite, sometimes there are more important things than being right. So we're very much looking forward to this opportunity. We truly appreciate this grant award from the Mass Gaming Commission and the assistance of the Mass Gaming Commission staff in our application process. Please let me know if you have some questions.
Anybody? No, it sounds great.
Tremendous opportunities, and keep up the good work. Thank you for letting us know about it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stebbins often talks about the communications problem that we need to convey to people. There is this wrinkle in the Corey situation, and a lot of people, we understand, have been sort of put off by, are afraid of the casino jobs for fear of the Corey checks and the automatic disqualification. We know it's a little complicated. You all obviously understand it, but anything you all and anybody else here, anybody watching, can do to try to get the word out. There's plenty of information on our website. There's a frequently asked questions thing that says, I have a criminal record, can I work at the casino? And there's an answer. So the more we can get that word out, the better off we'll be. And anybody who can pitch in on that would be really appreciated. Posting information and so forth.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
I think we'll make a slight schedule change. We have a lot of folks from the horse world who have come to visit a long way. So why don't we, Catherine, we'll move you and do the racing issues next. Director Lightbound.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Today, we're revisiting the Suffolk Downs request for the purse money in the Racehorse Development Fund purse account. Today, I have Chip Tuttle, COO of Suffolk Downs, and Bruce Barnett, legal counsel for Suffolk Downs. In your packet, there's several new letters, and some of the groups that sent those letters in are represented here today. Now I'll turn it over to Catherine Blue if she has any comments to make.
I know, Commissioners, you have in your packets additional letters. You had this before you a couple weeks ago. The letters in the packet are new. I would say that I have reviewed all of the letters in the packet. I do believe that after reviewing those letters, the issue that really is before the commission today is what does the commission do in a situation where a statute requires that money be used for a particular purpose, and that purpose doesn't entirely exist. I think we've talked a lot about how it gets paid and, you know, and whether you can escrow it or whether you can't, and, you know, different views on our regulation. But I think the ultimate issue is how the commission feels it should proceed, because it is in a position where we've been told the money by the legislature is for purses, and there are not sufficient purses to meet the amount of money that's available.
Anyone want to kick it off?
Well, General Counsel Blue, after reviewing all the letters, I know you've given us your legal opinion that you believe that the appropriate place for the monies are exactly where they are now. You haven't changed your opinion after reviewing the letters submitted by the various groups?
I have not. I believe that in a situation like this, the commission has really two choices: to either leave the money where it is until the need arises, or to go to the legislature for guidance, which in fact the commission has done now 3 times, and that's by filing legislation. There's a couple of examples where the racing statute has some similar situations. So for example, the statute requires that $80,000 a year be paid to an organization to provide services to people who live in the backstretch. There are no people living on the backstretch in Suffolk County. There is no organization providing services. So the commission can't pay that money out. You are in fact required to do it, but there is no place to pay it. Similarly, in the Greyhound Stabilization Fund, the commission is required to collect certain monies, but the legislature determined that you couldn't pay them out after June of 2014. So while the money is collected and it cannot go anyplace else, it needs to stay there until the legislature advises us that something else should be done with it. So I think the commission has in fact done both things that a commission would do in this situation, which is you have the money, it is in the fund it's supposed to be, and you have also asked the legislature for guidance.
Yeah, I wanna just underscore that notion that the letters that from Mr. Raphael and Mr. Bennett tend to focus only on one part of the requirement of the disbursement, but leave out another important piece, which is the proviso that these monies be advanced and paid for the purposes of purses. They're to be combined with monies that also come from the track or from the operator. And they are for live racing that is supposed to be taking place in a predetermined date or dates according to the purse agreement. And that's a key factor, not here. We've traditionally done that in the prior years. There's been even partial legislation that has been renewed year after year for the last 3 years, where we've also have been administering the funds like we are supposed to, in accordance with all those requirements, provided that there are a set number of dates. We understand how much money is going to go into these purses, and we approve those race days. When what we have in front of us totally does away with that notion. What Suffolk Downs or the NAHPPA is requesting is that we move those funds for days to be raised at an undetermined date after, sometime in the future. And I think that is hugely, hugely inconvenient in terms of what's actually going to happen, is prone to happen when the current law expires in July 1st.
31st.
So, and inconvenient, by that I mean there are all these external factors that are very important and, in my opinion, really require us to be as conservative as possible and see what happens. And that is the act of the legislature, which we've been saying now for a couple of years. You need to address this in some fashion. They've done it year by year, and that's their prerogative. But maybe they do it this year, maybe they don't. That's up to them. But more importantly, there's this potential for another operator who's interested into looking at operating thoroughbred racing, and that's also a very important factor for us to consider. So I am a total proponent of continuing to do what we've been doing, which is funding purses when they're requested, funding purses for days when they're requested. Suffolk Downs has the ability to run any number of days this year. They were allowed to, according to the legislation, to run anywhere between 1 and 50. You went for 8. There's another 42 days that you can run this year. If you have any, we'll look at them. We can fund by some quick account. I think we funded about $350,000 per day on prior purses. If you run the other 42 days this year, that's about $14 million. I think there's a balance there. So I think the request that is being made goes entirely against what we've been doing in the past, and is especially problematic with what we have in front of us in terms of what may take place in July. So I would be really opposed to the request.
Do other commission? Let's all just see if we have any opening comments, and then did you?
I wanted to make sure that we didn't have a difference of opinion. Our legal opinion has not, our team's legal opinion has not changed on the matter. As sometimes happens, lawyers disagree on how to read a statute or implement a law, and we have to determine what we want to do here. So I certainly am, as I have, relying on the good opinions of our team, and I will do that again today.
I have a couple questions. I think we all agree that we're trying to figure out how to work around a statute that didn't anticipate the situation we're in. I think that's fair. And we've been in this situation many times before, and we've frequently used our discretion to try to figure out the best workaround we can come up with. We can't put the money into the use of purses for the time being. But there are two other elements, I think, that we can accommodate. One is, the statute does say it's supposed to be an interest-bearing account on behalf of purses, and we're not doing that at the moment. And we could, it is within our power to put it, I think, to put it someplace where there could be, where the interest that accrues could go to subsequent purse accounts, or to the purse account for subsequent purses. And the second one is a little fuzzier, but we also have construed our job as to take whatever steps we think are constructive to protect and enhance and hopefully resuscitate the thoroughbred industry. So we did send a letter, which we were copied on, but we wrote it to the legislature saying we would suggest this is not the time to take the money from the Racehorse Development Fund for another purpose, because for the moment we're operating under a statutory structure that encourages us to take our best efforts to save the industry, and that includes protecting the Racehorse Development Fund unless and until the legislature changes its mind on what it wants to do with the Racehorse Development Fund. So if that's right, if we do have a mandate to have there be interest paid and paid to the purse account, and it's appropriate for us to take whatever actions we can within, the law and reason and so forth to protect the Racehorse Development Fund. It leads me to a couple of questions. First of all, if we did do what the horsemen are requesting and move the money into the purse account, what, if any, control do we then exercise? Could we take it back? Can we limit the amount that goes out for purses or other uses? What's our legal control over the money if we did put it into that PERS account?
So I just want to address the issue of the interest-bearing account. The interest-bearing account is not our account, it's the PERS account, because the PERS account bears interest. So we do not have an obligation to put it in an interest-bearing account. It has to go into the PERS account, which is interest-bearing, and then the interest accrues with it goes into all the other money, and it's there for additional PERSes. So when you look at the statute, that's where the obligation is. It's not on the Commonwealth. This money is held by the Commonwealth in the same way the Commonwealth holds other monies. In terms of if we put it,
Could we just back 1 second, Catherine? Run that by me again.
So if you look at the statute and the regulation, the language syncs up the same. It goes into an account by and for the benefit of the horsemen that bears interest. That account is the PERS account. It's not the account that we hold the money in before we give it out.
No, I understand.
Yeah, so-
But we are directed to deposit weekly into a separate interest-bearing PERS account.
And that's the one at the
That's the
track.
PERS account.
Right.
Yes, that's right. So
Right, but the point is that the statute anticipates that there'll be interest earned, and the interest earned will accrue to the PERSes.
if it's in the PERS account, yes, it does not contemplate interest
Well,
when the
that's the problem.
Commonwealth holds it.
No, there's nothing about the Commonwealth holding it. That's
There
the
is.
problem we're stuck with.
There's a separate section that creates the Racehorse Development Fund that is in the books of the Commonwealth, where it does earn interest, and it earns interest for the Commonwealth.
But we move it out every week.
Subject to all the proviso that follows that language, which is subject to PERSes and race days that we are also approved. The problem with just looking at that sentence is that it misses, the purpose, which is
I understand that.
to fund the PERSes.
I understand that.
If there is no race days, what is the point of moving it there? They're also supposed to combine it with monies that come from the licensee. What money are they putting up?
I understand that, but there are no PERSes to build. We know that's a problem, but I'm just saying, we're trying to figure out what intent remains that we can fulfill. We can't put it into PERS account for the use of PERSes because there are no PERSes, but we could, if we wanted, maybe we don't, but we could make sure that whatever interest there was accrued to the PERS account, so it was there later on. I think.
Well, that was one question that I thought of asking the comptroller, but they did not. They did not
So
have an answer.
they've left it to us.
Because the Commonwealth is taking advantage of that interest.
We would
be shorting the Commonwealth if we ever created a separate interest-bearing account, because they're currently taking that interest.
Yeah,
Because it is money
all right.
that resides in their books, and it's their money.
So we
Just
have
to-
a difference of opinion on that part of the issue. I'm going to get to you guys again.
Okay, Commissioner Zuniga, we do fulfill our statutory obligation to put those other funds toward the PERS account. You've asked that question.
What about 2019?
We have since 1992, and we will continue to fulfill our statutory obligations.
But let me hang on a second.
For how many days?
Well,
How many race days are you going to raise? in
respectfully,
2019?
Commissioner, the law requires you to deposit the money weekly into the PERS account, irrespective of the number of race days or the PERSes for those days. It's pretty black and white the way we see it, which is why we've made the request.
Yeah,
And
that's
we've
not
we've
how I
made
see
the, no, and if you want to debate the public policy of the 23K and its various provisions, you're welcome to do that.
That's what I'm
We
doing.
just think, yes, but we feel the commission has a very direct obligation to deposit that money into this account, and the commission has not, because we have not requested it up till now. And now we have requested it, and we think that the commission has a legal obligation to make that deposit into the PERS fund.
Mr. Tuttle, we've read all the letters, we understand the issue. Thank you for adding that point, but we also have a legal team that disagrees with your assertions. So as happens many times, different lawyers have different opinions. So we did read the letters, all of us, and so we understand the perspective
I got sort of sideswiped here. Let me just finish my chain of thought. If we were to put the money into the purse account, what, if any, controls do we have over it?
So, Director Lightbaum audits the purse account at the end of every year in terms of determining whether the purses that we were told were paid out were actually paid out. We don't have any other jurisdiction over the purse account, so if we put the money in there, we would have to ask for it to come back, and hopefully they would return it, as they have said that they would. But we only audit it to maintain that purses are paid out in accordance with the number of purses and the types of races that have been written and run over the course of a meet.
So we lose control, so to speak, of it. The other line of suggestion from the letters is if we don't agree with them on the obligation to put the money into the purse accounts, that there is a second clause which effectively says if we are notified of or take notice of the fact that the circumstances that the purse account was constructed for don't occur, like there aren't going to be any races, the racetrack is going to close, that series of A through F, that then our own regs, we wrote, this isn't in the law, but our own regs says that we should consider having, I forget whether we said we should have it or we should consider having a public hearing where we talk about what to do with it. And one of the possibilities we have proposed is to set up a separate interest-bearing account to save the money until some future time. And I think we gave ourselves 3 years where we could save up the money. That's the escrow fund, right? Sorry, thank you. The fallback position is the escrow fund. What it seems to me like we anticipated wisely this possibility. And if we can't come to agreement, if collectively we can't, or the commission can't come to an agreement on the first option, then we get the fallback option, which seemed like one pretty good idea to me, and would seem to me that would be an appropriate next step. Because then the money does collect interest, which maybe, I guess we don't know, maybe don't have a unanimous opinion on where that interest ought to go. But under our language, under our regs, we have this option of the escrow account, which does accrue interest, and it would accrue to the benefit of the purses. That seems to me to be a pretty good compromise.
Well, so long as we had full control of that account,
right,
I would be persuaded to go along. It's the notion
that would be an absolute precondition from my standpoint.
Yes.
The whole point would be to get the interest, which I happen to think was the intention, but I'm not going to debate the point.
Yep.
But save it up in order that if the horsemen get a track, or there's another track somewhere else, or somebody comes to us with the possibility
there's a benefit of an accrual,
that we've got that money and we've got whatever interest gets accrued, and we're in a position to strategically use it under our control, hopefully within the construct of a new statute, but this is under the existing statute. That seems to me to be a pretty fair compromise.
So as long as one of the triggering events in our regulation occurred, you could certainly do that. What you see from the letters we received is that, there are some parties that say that triggering event has occurred because racing won't occur next year, and other parties who say that certainly hasn't occurred because there's racing now. So definitely our regulation is set up with a number of triggering events. One is if a track closes, one if the track announces it's going to close, if there's going to be a transfer from one track to another. So there are triggering events. None of those events have occurred at this point in time.
That doesn't, I think that's very much a matter of opinion, and I know you've said that before, you said that too, but it seems to me like if what we were trying to say here was exactly what's happening, that we're stuck in this conundrum where we've got this money building up and we can't use it as anticipated. We clearly know what the problem is here. The problem is here, Suffolk Downs is closing, and whether it's next year or this year, we don't know. But I would certainly say that we would perfectly reasonably construe that a triggering event has happened and that we ought to have the hearing, and maybe
and and all have to happen, or just any one of them? Is that?
Well, they don't all have to happen, but if we're going to go on the basis that the track is closing, then Suffolk Downs would have to tell us that they are not going to race next year. We would have to get notice of a triggering event.
Well, it doesn't say next year, it just says to close a racetrack used for harness races or
Because they're
horse
racing
races.
this year. So this year, we
This
have
year
a
they're
meet
racing.
in place that we would expect to occur.
And one of the proposals that we read about, they are proposing to race as soon as 19, next year.
That's right.
So I,
But there's a closing, but Suffolk Downs is closing. We may open up someplace else. That would be.
Is that,
cool.
is
Well,
that
but-
what's happening? I don't know that we have gotten
So
that notice.
we have not notified anyone formally that we're closing. We are racing this year, and we have a lease beyond this year. Some of that is dependent on the progress of the development of the property. So we would agree with your counsel that we have not triggered any event that would allow the money to be escrowed. We also have, under agreement, another property in the Commonwealth. We're planning an announcement in the next week or two where we may be able to race in the future when we're not able to race at Suffolk Downs. We actually have a land under agreement for this, as opposed to what I've read about the other proposals. So it's our intent to use this money for purses, which is explicitly what the legislature intended and what the law intended. To your point, Commissioner Zuniga, I can't tell you that we would use it all for purses this year, but we would use it for purses according to statute and with the agreement of the horsemen's, the recognized horsemen's group, the New England HBPA. So and as I said in our letter, or Council Barnett said in his letter, that were we not to use it for purses, we would certainly return it because we don't believe there's any other lawful use of that money right now.
And if I might
And I would say, just when you have that plan, or when that plan is actually coming to fruition, you can always come back and we can disperse according to when you have a purse agreement and days that are
I appreciate that.
specific.
Sequentially, we had to make the request. You know, we have, unfortunately, these things always don't line up the way you'd like them to.
Right.
I, of course, agree with both General Counsel Blue and Mr. Tuttle that none of the triggering events under the regulation has happened. But I also want to point out, as we said in the letter, that regulation, as you said, Mr. Chairman, is not in the statute, and it is as invalid an implementation as is the regulation that purports to give the Commission the authority to withhold the money in the first place. It shall deposit weekly means just that. And I want to make sure that there's no doubt that that remains our position. Commissioner Zuniga, I disagree with your interpretation that the proviso with respect to the combination of the Racehorse Development Fund money with other monies pursuant to the purse contract puts any sort of precondition on the obligation of the Commonwealth to deposit the money into the purse account at the track where it gathers interest for the benefit of the horsemen. It just makes clear that the intent is that that money will be supplemented with money according to the purse account and the purse, with the purse agreement. And every purse agreement that Suffolk Downs has had with its horsemen, as long as I've been involved, allocates certain portions of revenue outside of the Racehorse Development Fund to go into purses, and that's always happened, and that will continue to happen.
Well, let me say, I disagree with you on the notion that we're withholding money. It's where it's being, it's the money is sitting where the statute directs us to put it.
With all respect, it's not, because the statute says shall deposit weekly into the purse account. So you cannot, I just don't understand how you can say
There's provided,
that
there are two
There's
providers.
two provisions that you conveniently, not mention. Now, there's also another important history and context to all of this. Before this partial legislation that allowed you to do between 1 and 50 days of racing, there's a tradition of the legislature setting the number of race dates as a minimum for however many years since you were since you were given a license, probably.
We believe
in that context, there's a date certain of number of dates days that you're going to run through the year. And in that context, it's important to deposit whatever money is going to come through weekly or however often. The problem with that we all find ourselves in is when this Chapter 128A and C was set to expire after the Gaming Act, the legislature hasn't acted on its renewal. And we've been operating under this patch of a legislation that gives you tremendous flexibility to determine the number of days between 1 and 50. And in that context, we've been operating under, okay, we'll approve the number of days and we'll disperse according to what we think is reasonable. That would be going against what we've been doing. What you're asking us to do now would be going exactly against that we've been doing.
It is, I certainly agree with you that what we're asking for now is different than what has happened for the last 3 years, right? But the fact that it's different doesn't mean that what has been happening for the last 3 years was consistent with the statute.
And we presume that the legislature, well, it hasn't addressed 128A and 128C as some people presumed would happen with the passage of the gaming law. It has acted on an annual basis to renew the laws, so that we presume the legislature has acted affirmatively and is okay with this and is okay with 1 to 50 days, or else that wouldn't be in the law. So, we continue to follow the statute and I don't want to belabor the point.
Section 60 says you must deposit weekly with the racing licensee. And 3 times since that was adopted, the legislature has said Sterling Suffolk Racecourse is the racing licensee. When you put those together, I don't see how there's a question that they're directing that the money.
So why didn't you ask for this 3 years ago?
We weren't as concerned about the fact that the money was going to disappear. Right? We saw the numerous attempts to raid the fund last year. They were successfully beaten back, thankfully. We're in budget season again this year. I do not know, for example, whether the escrow fund that you have been discussing would be immune from a similar legislative grab.
And we also in November announced our plan to develop a new racing facility in the Commonwealth. And as I said the last time we met here, having that money in the purse account checks off a box. It's a pretty important step to being confident about the ability to develop that new racing facility, because if we know we have that money in the purse account already, based on the law as it stands now, that we have great confidence that we'll be able to pay purses with that money in the future.
Mr. Tuttle, we've been hearing about this plan for 3 years now, and frankly, we haven't seen a plan.
Not from us,
And now that
Commissioner.
there's another plan on the table, it seems like your strategy has changed. Frankly, we would love multiple proposals, as we do with gaming as well. The competition would be welcomed by this commission. But I think for one, we have 2 legal opinions here, and we have to make a decision on that.
Commissioner, would be very happy to share our plan with you, especially since we are an existing licensee and have property under agreement, which I think puts it a couple of steps ahead of the other one.
Whenever you choose to do that, we listen to all proposals.
Thank you.
Why would you not give us notice that Suffolk Downs is going to close?
Because I can't tell you.
It doesn't say when. There's
Yeah.
nothing that says you have to tell us when. It just says that it's going to happen.
I'm sure Plainridge is going to close too. Someday. I mean,
Why would you? I mean, it's it's
Well,
a
you
trigger.
sold,
It's a
the property
triggering-
has been sold.
It's a triggering event that would put the money.
The
into
property has been sold, but we have a lease to continue racing operations.
When is the lease end?
I'd have to look at it to tell you exactly, but I know there are options to continue it as well.
Anybody else want to jump in? I want to just clarify first of all, you obviously disagree with Mr. Raphael, who wrote the first letter, right? So
Yeah.
we thought you guys were on the same team here. It took me a while
Well,
to
it's,
figure out.
it's 28 years of dealing with horsemen, and it's always a mystery to me. Thank you.
Okay. So the section 60C little I, deposit weekly, the first provided is that the earned interest in the account be credited to the purse account. That's not a problem. The second provided further that licensees shall combine these funds with revenues from existing purse agreements to fund purses for live races consistent with those agreements with the advice and consent of the horsemen. Is that condition being met?
Yes, it is.
So,
What days?
so
To be determined at a later date?
Commissioner, respectfully, the number of racing days and the obligation to deposit the money are completely different things.
I see them totally tied
I-
by
I-
the
I kn-
proviso.
I know you do, and it's obviously an area of disagreement, but there's, and I, just, there's no quid pro quo there.
but let me just clarify my, so
Yeah.
the licensees shall combine these funds, the money that comes in weekly, with revenues from existing purse agreement. Do you have an existing purse agreement?
Yes, we do, and the commission has a copy of it.
Apropos of the racing for 2018?
For 2018, we have a purse agreement.
What about 2019?
Let me just finish, could I?
No, this is key. They're requesting, sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
So there is an existing purse agreement, and what other monies, where do the monies come from? Combine these funds with revenues from the existing purse agreement.
So on all of the wagering that we process, there are, through the various statutes, 128A, 128C, and the statute that renewed our license in 2015, there are amounts that are dedicated to purses, and we have an obligation that we fulfill to make those contributions to purses. And then, by way of our agreement with the horsemen, we figure out how the purse account gets spent.
So in the purse agreement, do you agree on the number of race dates? On the number and the race dates?
Yes.
So you're all set for 2018. That's the one that we approved. We're going to disperse.
Well, as has happened in years past, and in fact, last year when we requested extra race dates, Commissioner, you specifically criticized us for not asking for the money in advance and up front. When we came to you last year and added extra race dates, you were very critical that we had not anticipated and asked for money in advance.
Yep.
And there is a chance that
Okay,
we may
so
race
what's-
more than 6 days this year.
Okay. So what are you planning for 2019?
We are planning to continue racing at Suffolk Downs if that's possible. And if it's not
Do you have a
possible,
purse agreement for that year?
we don't. The purse agreement's done on an annual basis.
Okay. So if we're only operating for this year, for the purse agreement that you have this year, what race dates, how many more days are you going to race this year?
I don't know yet.
Why don't you come and tell us, and we'll disperse those monies accordingly, like we've done for the past 3 years?
Because we believe you have an affirmative obligation to put that money in the purse account,
that's
whether
what
we tell you that or not.
disagree.
Yes,
Yep.
and I don't mean to be obtuse about it. It's just,
Yep.
that's.
No, that's
yeah.
where you and I disagree.
Can the money be used, the question I asked you earlier about, is there any control? If we're mandated to put the money into a separate interest-bearing purse account, can the money, once it's out of our control, once it's in that account, what if somebody wants to use it for something else?
So the money that comes for purses from 128A and 128C by statute can be used for operational administrative expenses. The money from the Racehorse Development Fund can only be used for live purses. So that's where the purse agreement kind of comes into play, because they have to determine how that money in the purse account is going to be used. What we have said in the past is if you want to use money for the horsemen, for the NEHBPA, you need to use the money that statutorily is allowed to do that. That's only the purse money that comes through 128A and 128C, not through the Racehorse Development Fund. So if we put the money in the account now, we would have to go through at the end of the day, and we would have to audit it we'd have to determine which streams were used for what purpose, because our statute says it's purses for live races, and we've been clear over time that that's what it can be used for.
Do you guys agree with that?
For perspective, with respect to the audit question, the Racehorse Development Fund money that's received is kept separate from other purse account money. And so that there would not be a separating out the streams
And
concern.
is it only to be used for purses?
Correct. We have taken, we agree with Catherine's interpretation of that in 23K is very strict about the uses of the Racehorse Development Fund only to be paid to the owners of the horses that race at the facility. So in our prior purse agreements for the last several years, we have used some of the other purse funds to help offset some live racing expenses by agreement with the horsemen. But we have been careful to segregate the Racehorse Development Funds because we agree that they cannot be used for anything other than purses.
There is one provision of the statutes, 128A, I think, that says redirects 3% of all purse monies that are paid out to the breeders. And so that is Racehorse Development Fund money to the extent it's been used for purses. We've followed that statutory directive with respect to that 3%. That's one.
And are you comfortable giving us something that is, what's the right word, that's controlling, that assures us that whatever the future holds, that money will only be used for purses?
Sure. I mean, yes.
We're there.
Right.
If we did what you're asking, you would somehow give us something which is legally binding, but that money could only go for purse races in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I would expect we would tie it to whatever the legislation says, whatever the statutes say, so that if the new statute says different purposes, we could do it that too.
Yeah.
I mean, whereas one issue I think that's everybody's wrestling with is, what happens to this money if it doesn't turn into more races?
Sure.
Or if it turns out more races with another group of horsemen, not your group of horsemen. So I would think we would want, if we were to do this, and I don't know whether we will or not, but if we did, it would, I for one would want to make absolutely sure that it was clearly binding, that there was no out on other use of that money.
I think the real assurance would come from us taking, not doing an affirmative disbursement until we were assured that there was going to be races and a purse agreement, and those dates have been determined, just like what we've been doing for the last number of years. If we have no assurances, the safest thing to do is to leave the money in the Racehorse Development Fund and see what happens with the legislation that's now sunsetting in only a couple of months.
I certainly understand where you're coming from on that, and, I was hoping, I thought the triggering event was the way out here, but the statute's pretty clear to me, and it's not.
But it's being read very narrowly. I think it needs to be read into context and as to what was the intention of this. If it's to save thoroughbred racing, which is what I'm trying to really accomplish here as well in the Commonwealth, is there's a big there are a number of undetermineds here, notably the expiring legislation, the real potential for a permanent fix, not just a one-year extension, as you've heard from the legislature, and I think it's worthwhile seeing that through.
Commissioner, nothing about what you just said would change with the disbursement of the fund, because we can only use it for its legal purpose of purses. So, and we have said that we would treat it according to statute, and if it's not used for purses, we would return it. So what we're asking is that we follow the statute in terms of the treatment of the funds, and then if it's not used expressly as the statute says it needs to be used, we would return it to the commission.
I think one of the things the commission may want to take into account is under the current statute, and let's assume the current statute didn't change, the determination on the split is up to the horse racing committee. They're the folks that make that determination. I would expect that if the Commonwealth were fortunate enough to have more than one track in either breed, the horse racing committee would ask for input on how to split each part of the split between multiple tracks. I mean, there is nothing under the horse racing, under the Racehorse Development Fund that says you can only have one track of each breed. So, you know, we have to give some consideration as to what we might do if we had 2 thoroughbred tracks or 2 harness racing tracks, or, you know, if the commission takes all the money and it goes in one track, yes, it would have to come back. But the horse racing committee is still there, and those are some of the things that they would, you know, want to consider and make some decisions about. So in the larger context, we pay out the money, but the horse racing committee is a separate body, and it has some oversight over that particular issue.
Anybody else want to speak? What do we want to just sort of summarize where we're all at and get a sense of?
Well, or make a motion, see how it goes.
Yeah, well, I just want to clarify my position on this. I think this is a situation which was unanticipated. It's problematic in a number of ways. But if I think it's the statute is pretty clear, particularly with the assurance, the binding assurance that the money will only be used for purses, and that if it isn't used for purses, it will be returned. Under those circumstances, you know, that I think that we're sort of stuck with the statute.
Yeah, I happen to disagree on the notion that we can just wait for assurances once we make the disbursement. There's one element about if we really are concerned about the narrow notion of the accrual of interest, so long as we retained control of an account that bears interest, I would be fine completing that part of the statute. If we can somehow, you know, just operationalize it, set a separate bank account, and just deposit the money there.
We don't have a request to do that, though.
We don't. That's right. But if we were going down that scenario, that's an much easier fix for me.
I'm with you on that.
It's the deposit, it's the disbursing of the money that, in my mind, presents a whole host of other issues, especially in the context of everything that's going on. There's enough uncertainty and hopefully certainty just in a number of months that simply waiting a few months could give us a much better understanding of what context is out there and comfort level as to how we can comply with all the elements of the statute. But I would be in favor of doing essentially what we've been doing up until, you know, since this has been in a uncertain way, which is to disburse according to when we get presented the number of days that are date certain and the level of funding that is, you know, good for the industry as a whole, to attract people from outside, as well as, you know, give opportunity to the local horsemen. If we simply disperse this, I think we would be losing a big piece of what could be an important piece of the puzzle in trying to continue thoroughbred racing. So I think it would be, I'm a hard no on this request. If the motion is affirmative, I won't make it, and I will be voting against it if it's made.
And just for the record, I completely agree. You know, I just, that it's not a good thing to do. It's not the best use. It's not necessarily consistent with the long-term best interests.
Or with the spirit
but the
of the
legislature has had time after time after time an opportunity to fix this. We've been very explicit about it, and they've left us with this, so.
Are we ready for a motion?
I think so.
Mr. Chair, I move that this commission deny the request of Suffolk Down Racecourse to transfer the thoroughbred monies into the Sterling Suffolk purse account.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That was Commissioner Cameron, Commissioner Zuniga, Commissioner Stebbins.
And O'Brien.
And O'Brien. Oh, okay. Opposed? Aye. Me, nay. Okay, next item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at back to item 6.
This is Regulation 205 CMR 101. This is the accompanying 205 CMR 115 et al. This regulation was before the commission a few weeks ago, I believe now, and we talked about the two open issues, which was the standard of review for the hearing officer of a decision from the IEB or the racing stewards or judges, and then the standard of review for the commission of any decision by the hearing officer, as well as the standard of review for the commission when it hears things originally. If you look at page 10, section 14, those are the changes that define the standard of review for the hearing officer. We put in the standard that we agreed to, which was it's substantial evidence with deference to the decision by either the IEB or the racing judges and stewards. And then if you look at page 13, section 11, that is the standard of review for the commission, which is substantial evidence. And then we also talked about on page 14, section 12, that's the language regarding de novo review by the commission and the applicability of leaving the determination of credibility at the hearing officer. So those were the changes that you had requested. Those are the changes that we've made. If you are comfortable with those, we would like to start the promulgation process for this regulation. And the accompanying pieces, 115 et al., are the changes that need to be made in other regulations because we're making changes to 101. So we have a motion there for you to use. The first one is for the amended small business impact statements. That motion goes first. And if you would vote on that, and then if you would vote on the motion for the amendment to the regs, that'd be great.
So I move that the commission approve the small business impact statement for 205 CMR 101. This is for the adjudicatory proceedings, and 205 CMR 115 et al., which includes the technical updates to various regulations required by the amendments to 205 CMR 101 as included in the packet.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Got another one?
The second one is for the regulation itself.
So I further move that the commission approve the version of 205 CMR 101 adjudicatory proceedings and 205 CMR 115 et al., which includes the technical updates to various regulations required by the amendments to 205 CMR 101 as included in the packet, and authorize the staff to take all steps necessary to begin the regulatory promulgation process.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are to our final section 8. Any commissioner updates?
Well, just maybe to comment on the progress of MGM, which we heard briefly in the morning, and I think the last time I was here was a number of months ago, and there was very little on the floor, just a lot of roughing and cables, and none of the equipment here. The progress is really remarkable in just a number of months. But as Director Bedrosian said, there's a lot that needs to happen, and these next few months are going to be clearly busy months.
Yeah, I agree. It was a really impressive tour. Very dedicated folks trying to make it all come together. And, there's a lot to be done, our team, their team, but it seems to be coming together nicely.
I would add, I was out here on Monday and met with the workforce team, and the director of the local career center said he's hearing complaints. They're obviously pushing MGM career opportunities. But people on Monday, up till Monday, or maybe up until today, were walking in and say, well, that's great, I'd love to apply for that job, but who am I going to be working for? Hopefully the news of a new opening date and some of the comments made about the facility in Boston will reassure people that there are career opportunities to be pursued with MGM. I also was impressed by the amount of work that has been done since the last time, but I have to give special props to MGM, because as you walk through that facility, they are being respectful and paying a considerable amount of attention to paying homage to the past and the history of this city. And you see it reflected in architecture, you see it reflected in carpeting. That truly means to me that, they are paying attention to the little details and again, being respectful of the history and the tradition in the city of Springfield.
Yeah, we don't want to give away too many surprises, I think.
Right.
Anybody else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.